Hello and welcome to 6 Part. Today I'm gonna continue the story. What if Deku had green Amaterasu Quirk Part 2? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
For Izuku no, the Green Devil, it was just another typical morning. Began by hitting Musudafu's filth on the underside. However, there was a fascinating small detail in this one. He discovered a list of orders on a clipboard. All for one? Who was that? Definitely a boss villain. He would be careful to remember that name. A tree limb apparently attacked him after he left the shipping dock warehouse, partially covered in blood. Halt, villain. Kamui Woods encircled the young vigilante with his branch arm. Izuku was about to burn through when he was knocked off his feet by a powerful water blast. Backdraft screamed, "Your reign of terror is over," and countered the boy with an endless stream of water. The devil rose again, steam rising from his body. He muttered angrily, "Heroes." The backdraft and Kamui Woods, the arbor hero, extended his arm to encircle Izuku's other arm and torso. When Kamui pointed his super soakers toward the apprehended threat, he said, "Enough is enough, boy. Stand down." Izuku assessed the situation and said, "You can't beat two heroes. Give it up." Wood is a terrible match for fire, but Kamui Woods has wide-range capture moves. Backdraft exists to prevent me from burning him. Not a horrible matchup. Izuku's feet suddenly erupted in flames, but foolish all the same. With the velocity and speed they would have anticipated from Mirko or Endeavor, he rocketed off the ground. By digging his feet into the pavement, Kamui showed foresight. While Backdraft began chilling the jets blazing beneath his feet, he held onto his grip. There was a tremendous surge of steam. But he isn't getting any weaker. His fever ought to be cooled by the water. Kamui pondered. The steam surge eventually subsided, but the flames persisted. He changed to icy flames that extinguish only at his will. He glared dismissively at the heroes over his shoulder. His flames suddenly became more intense, and he retreated from Kamui even more forcefully. "No you don't." The arbor pulled the user of the green flame back to him with both arms. It was an error. His grip started to relax as the bone-chilling flames were poured straight into him. Damn it. Izuku glared at the ground where Backdraft had aimed his super soakers and used a powerful water blast to climb to the height of the Green Devil. He prepared his peculiarity to hit the boy like a tsunami wave. "You idiot." Kamui Woods screamed in agony, "Aarrgghhh," before Backdraft could strike. When they both looked down, they saw the arbor hero's upper half burned as a wave of green fire engulfed him. It was a fresh fire that erupted from the earth where the devil shot off, not from his feet. They were so focused on him that they were receptive to anything, even the remaining fire on the pavement. The arbor hero collapsed, battered and scorched. "Kamui, no," exclaimed Backdraft. The wood coiled around him, and the green devil burned his way out. He had enough control over it that Kamui Woods's arms turned black and crumbled. "Why you? You monster!" Backdraft shot forth, his voice and legs trembling. He was obviously scared. The green devil hovered down calmly. The emerald monster crossed his arms to block and wrapped himself in flames, but Backdraft held out his arms and blasted him, saying, "Don't worry, they'll grow back." Around them, the largest steam wave to date formed. Izuku thought, "I'm sick of this," and he started to approach the hydro hero cautiously. What he was witnessing appalled Backdraft. Even though he was doing everything he could to stop the heat, the green fire kept approaching him. "No, this isn't possible." Izuku was close enough for his opponent to hear him through the loud hissing of evaporating water. "Your water could be enough to put out Endeavor's fire, but my flames are much more resilient than his. Next time, try using ice." Before a fiery fist hit Backdraft's gut and threw him back a few meters, that was the last sound he heard. Death Arms and Mount Lady in the shadowy lanes of Musutafu, close to a station, the Green Devil was loitering. He hadn't come across much by midday. He wasn't quite ready to don the mask, but normally he would be in his civilian alias, Zoo, by this point. He had to get his thoughts straight before donning the mask that made him think of the nice girls he had met. As well as Rei, who suffered injuries as a result of searching for him. "Need a hanky?" Izuku's head snapped to the side, revealing Death Arms, a professional hero, standing on an apartment balcony. He stood with his fists drawn back with a smug grin. Izuku quickly separated them and made his way directly to the alley's exit. It's an odd location for him to patrol. Kamui Woods and Backdraft were no different. A creamy, purple suit around a voluptuous form blocked his view of the light at the end of the tunnel. These heroes. Damn, of course you're here. The Green Devil allowed the gargantuan heroine to push him to the ground and hold him down beneath her enormous palm without even trying to change course. Sorry, kiddo, but your joyride's over, she replied. Izuku was not at all injured by the impact. After shielding himself with a thick layer of frigid fire, he rose to shove Mount Lady away from him. When he slipped through her clutches, he was struck in the stomach. As he flew without experiencing any discomfort or risk, he thought, "You got here quick." The Green Devil was pinned on the ground by Death Arms, who then started bashing him into the sidewalk. To deflect the blows, the Green Flame user had his arms folded. As the professional pounded the killer to the ground, the locals watched and applauded. Not quite, Mount Lady. Death Arms kept swinging until the pavement beneath them crumbled, saying, "Hey, take it easy. Are you trying to kill him?" He kept pounding, saying, "He's tough enough to take it, aren't you, ya bastard?" After a while, he moved the arms aside and began hammering his chest and stomach. This went on for a few minutes until the expert started to perspire. "How'd ya like that, punk?" Death Arms was confident about himself. The youngster would be too hurt to move, even if he wasn't unconscious. You can only imagine how shocked he was to emerge from the wreckage without even tripping. He simply got himself up and wiped the dirt off of his face. Death Arms, and everyone in the vicinity gaped at the Green Devil's seemingly injury-free state. The strong hero took a small step back. The Green Devil's voice was icy. "Not bad. You might have even bruised me." The now irate professional balled his fists at his sides. "Why you little," he said, but he stopped when the devil materialized right in front of him. He quickly closed the distance with a cocked, heated hand. A blazing hot punch hit Death Arms' chin before he could register it, and then a wave of heat sent him hurtling into the air. The expert moaned, "Goo," as his chin burnt and his mouth bled. He was thrown so high that he was caught by Mount Lady. People on the ground were watching the event in terror. The Green Devil sent Death Arms flying with a single blow and fully threw off blows powerful enough to shatter concrete. Izuku, however, seemed unconcerned about them. He was aiming for the muscular hero. How annoying. As he flew up to a rooftop on par with the pros, he thought, only a bully tries to solve his problems with brute force. As Death Arms gazed at the emerald monster, it was obvious that he was furious. Sweat was streaming down his head and veins were exploding. "And you're much easier to destroy than you realize, just like any bully." Mount Lady attempted to soothe her coworker by whispering words, but the Green Devil's two straightforward statements overshadowed it. He looked away from them and remarked, "I'm bored." Death Arms jerked. "What did you just say, you heartless little shit?" The Green Devil simply turned his back on him and proceeded slowly despite his angry cry. The final straw was, "I said I'm bored, you're boring me." Leaping from Mount Lady's hands, Death Arms was ready to crush the devil. Izuku simply placed his palm behind his head and let out a stream of green heat, saying, "How sad." Death Arms fell to the earth in a burning heap, completely consumed. He would have to live with the idea that a vigilante child had not given him any attention at all when he regained consciousness. Mount Lady was left to handle that. Despite her best efforts, she was unable to hold on to him without getting burned. Izuku gazed at her with sorrow in his burning eyes as she blew her smoking hands. "Takayama. Pardon me," he said, lighting his right arm and launching it forward. Mount Lady's face was seized by a huge arm of flames that were just moderately hot. Surprisingly quickly, the mountain hero was thrown to the ground after being taken by surprise. The back of her head was bleeding now, and there was a slight tremor in the ground below. The boy was gone by the time the blonde regained her senses. That felt very familiar. Kyoka Jiro. Contrary to popular belief. Bathed in the orange light of the waning sun, the Green Devil stood over the rooftops of Musutafu. He chose an area that wasn't overly populated. No heroes, no cops, just people going about their daily lives. As I had anticipated. The heroes are so intent on me that they ignore the places where I haven't been visible or active. As a result, the public is left to fend for themselves while they're being taken advantage of. He saw a young adolescent girl attempting to get rid of some punk her age just as he was finishing his idea. She didn't give a damn, but he was showing her his peculiarity and flexing. His peculiarity that cast stone on his arms. Izuku's brows tightened when he recognized one of his former Aldera classmates, and that girl with the ox cable earlobes and purple hair. Kyoka. Suddenly, he had a strong want to murder the blockhead who was currently bothering the purplet. He fashioned a fire sword out of his right arm and stepped close enough to hear them without being seen. Kyoka only gave him a cold gaze. "Come on, babe. With a quirk as tough as mine, I could keep your delicate self safe. The blockhead became irritated and asked, how are you going to protect anything with such a fragile-looking power? Why don't we test that? What did you say? My quirk's top tier compared to your freaky ears? The girl's ear jacks pointed directly at the boy's stone-covered arms, sending strong vibrations into them that broke the rock and left his arms limp. After giving him the finger, the ox cord girl turned to leave. Like I said, fragile. The green-haired onlooker from above was grinning broadly as the fool lay broken on the ground. He saw the girl he had rescued from bullying boldly leave. At least she isn't a concern for me. He was about to walk away when he noticed a strange movement out of the corner of his eye. An adult guy surveying his surroundings before vanishing into an alley's darkness. He followed and discovered that someone had gotten in touch with him. In order to hover over the man and be able to hear both ends of the call from a distance, Izuku extended his palm and released tiny green embers. How are the heroes doing? Just like you said, Demon Lord. So focused on the Green Devil, we can get away with pretty much anything, replied the agent. Demon Lord? Izuku thought. Sounds like a self-centered boss villain. Easy now, depending on how things go, that could change dramatically. I take it the preparations are going according to plan. Yes, sir. In just 1 month, it'll be ready for its first test drive. On the contrary, the Demon Lord was grinning wickedly. The agent grinned happily and said, great, and I just wanted to say, thank you. It's been my pleasure to serve you, all four. For being such a good martyr. The agent's spine tingled as the criminal commander reached the end of his sentence and hung up. No. He put down his phone and turned to face himself. Green embers. He wouldn't, I said. A ball of green flames came hurtling down from above. Not like this. The frantic man's hands spat out golden sparks of lightning, but they couldn't stand a chance against the boy's shielding flames. The man was knocked unconscious to the ground as the impact of the attack went through his body. Taking the man's phone, the Green Devil looked through the contacts. No identifying contact information. He then contacted the number after looking through the call history. It had been abandoned. Although this criminal hides his tracks, he did leave one item behind to his agent, whom the police might question. Someone would undoubtedly notice Izuku's green flames in the alley and notify the cops. Something nagged at the lad as he ran from the site. Demon Lord, it was unquestionably all for one. He is clearly not someone to be taken lightly, especially if he can have a group of criminals at his disposal. Did he get the medications utilized by the Blade villain? In a month, what is he planning? It made less sense for him to know all of this so readily the more he considered it. He prefers to work in the shadows, at a safe distance. He is adept at hiding his identity. He was aware that I was listening. He wanted me to pay attention. What will happen in a month? What are you up to, all for one? The best genist and ingenious 1 week has passed since the event with that agent, and one of them, at least, has learned of the plot of All for One. Izuku is still unaware of a lot of things, though. It will be at least 3 more weeks until his plan is implemented. The Demon Lord is hidden where? With the Green Devil, what does he want? He's been watching for how long? To what extent is he aware? The youthful vigilante is agitated by these inquiries and is consequently less inclined to be lenient toward villains and criminals. His musings were cut short as his clothes became so tight that they rendered him immobile. It was almost impossible for him to move without ripping his garments. Best genist. He was unable to move, but he was still able to release flames that kept him in the air. Izuku felt something hot and swift approaching him. He tried to defend himself in his flames because he thought it was going to hit him. The heat from a radiator briefly touched his quirk, and he felt a strong blow on the back of his head. Ingenium. It was enough to send him tumbling to the floor. All he could do was shake his now bleeding head and give the Fiber Hero and Turbo Hero a fierce look. With a somewhat tense expression, Best Genist remarked, I apologize for the harsh methods, but even if you are a child, we can't let you continue tearing everything around you apart. Ingenium declared, it's over, no more running. Izuku simply snarled and attempted to light his flare, but Best Genist gripped him so tightly that he was unable to breathe. Without a word, the Green Devil extinguished the fire around him. Resistance is futile. You may be a match for the local heroes, but we're highly regarded for a reason. That's better. Ingenium shifted to seize the apprehended vigilante, but he abruptly stumbled due to severe discomfort in his engine calf muscles, and they're emitting smoke. Best Genist's attention was diverted, and he unbound the Green Devil's shackles. Ingenium, what's the matter? He blasted the earth beneath him and shot off, quickly setting his right arm on fire hot enough to burn his sleeve. Not so fast, blackout bind. Izuku's body's intact fabric cinched around him once again, particularly around his neck. His arm was free this time, but he was still unable to breathe or move. The flames around it were burning brighter and hotter as he hoisted it aloft. Hellspider. Flash Fire Fist. From his fingertips came flaming tendrils as large as the Green Devil's arm. After admiring the boy's performance, Best Jeanist tried his best to avoid him. That's what Endeavor is doing, on a bigger scale, though. Ingenium couldn't even get off the ground, but Best Jeanist had to restrict his movements to keep the demon child under control without getting roasted alive. Jeanist had to hastily get out of the way of the downed speedster as Izuku shot a fire tendril at it. Both upper professionals were enveloped in intense flames, and Izuku got the window he sought. The last thing they saw before their target vanished was the glistening fire that burned their skin. The central hospital. It was Tsukachi who said, "I have no words." The majority of the heroes involved in this action were receiving treatment for their serious burns on medical beds. The demon child burned and beat Kamui Woods, Ingenium, Death Arms, Backdraft, Best Jeanist, and Mount Lady, who suffered injuries to her hands and a portion of her face. Hawks and All Might were the only ones remaining. Furthermore, they now have even more reason to be afraid thanks to the Green Devil's friend. They combed through the man's memories and caught fleeting images of green fire, test tubes, beakers, and a warehouse. If the man hadn't been so determined to keep nothing from them, they would have seen a lot more. Such loyalty is still commanded by All for One even after he betrays his pawns. The public is losing faith in heroes. A number of heroes have been beaten, and there is reason to believe All for One is back in action. One child was responsible for all of this. We need to bring him in, not just for the public's peace of mind, but everyone's good, him included. If that monster were to gain control of his quirk, I don't like our odds. Tsukachi was sitting at his computer. He had Hawks with him. He appeared to be far away. Tsukachi glanced at the young pro, wondering where he was taking this. All Might and I split up on patrol. We have communicators you can track and alert us if the other finds something. Cut us off. You can track us, but no alerts. I'll handle the Green Devil myself. Tsukachi gave him a look that said he had lost his mind. What? How the hell are you going to do that? Fighting him alone plays in his favor against an opponent who can burn your feathers. Hawks simply put his hands behind his head without any particular emphasis. Yeah, and he probably knows that, too. I'd be screwed in a fight. Tsukachi was not calmed by this careless demeanor. The kid's fast, has sharp eyes and reflexes, and after fighting all these heroes, he must have leveled up pretty considerably from the guy who almost killed Teleki. The wing hero gave him a serious look before Tsukachi could actually inquire as to whether Hawks had become suicidal. But this is better than having All Might with me. In fact, that's the scenario I want to avoid. Tsukachi murmured. I think I'm starting to get where you're coming from. All Might may not be concerned with peaceful methods, not very fitting for someone called the symbol of peace. He was terminated by the Hawks. But that's one of the reasons I put you two together. You can rein him in if he loses himself to rage. Hawks gave the detective a sly smile. Yeah, and as fun as it's been being the #1 hero's animal companion, I've got a better plan in mind. Well, an idea. Okay, a gamble. The kid is nowhere near All Might's level. Let's keep it that way. Hawks amidst a nearly deserted 4-lane road, the Green Devil stood victorious. The sole car on the route was a burning car with goons who were unconscious beside it. All of a sudden, he had to roll away from approaching missiles that were headed for his spot on the ground. He flipped back into the air, showcasing his agility. In order to avoid a red and yellow blur that landed on the ground, he lowered his head. From beneath him, Hawks yelled, "Hey yo!" while brandishing 2 massive feather blades. The #3 hero, he said, setting the area around them on fire. Hawks felt no increase in temperature. It is as simple as flipping a switch to change his temperature from freezing to hot. Flames burning in his palms, the wing hero gazed up at the vigilante teenager. He must know I'm in a bad spot, and this is insurance. He gestured for the child to approach him by pointing his blades at him. That's exactly what the Green Devil did. He pushed himself in the direction of the wing hero, eager to get fried chicken for supper. With his left hand, he released a powerful blast of fire that Hawks managed to avoid. He moved to my right. Why not attack from my blind spot, above the flames? Izuku nevertheless fired a shot at his right. Hawks was fast enough to avoid it once more. After examining one another, the 2 young guys concluded that he could have used the flames already behind me to hold me down. He's observing me and holding back. This is where they diverged, though. He must have learned about my peril from his friends. It would be simpler to simply take me down, so why even bother with this? Izuku pondered. Hawks, meantime, stood next to a raging green forest fire, prepared to carry out his scheme. The green devil charged directly toward him, bladed arm poised, saying, "Get ready for this." Hawks, too, reduced his wings to just under half their full size by throwing his feather blades and a lot of feathers into the flames. Izuku paused, perplexed. Hawks was already behind, but now he's thrown the game totally. Why? He only inquired, "Do you have a death wish?" Hawks only laughed absently. The wing hero put his hands behind his head and kicked his right foot over his left, saying, "Nah, but I would if I was planning to fight you." He couldn't appear more relaxed. The green devil carefully measured Hawks, measuring his thermal energy to determine his mental condition. "Fire and cramped spaces don't really work for me, and this flaming birdcage you made would make fighting you hell. You're a bright kid, you must know the ins and outs of my quirk." He's not exactly at ease, but he's also not buying time. He desires to speak. Izuku allowed his handblade to deteriorate against his better judgment. He said, "Fierce wings, first. Your feathers are tough, yet supple. You control each one, and pick up vibrations through them from a long distance. You have peerless speed and movement, but weakness to fire and power types. Categories I fall into." The hero of the wing clapped his hands. Then he lit his hand in a big ball of fire and said, "Top marks, kid. You're up next." The youngster was silent and ready to attack. "I mean, don't you think it's fair? You know all the important stuff about my quirk, can't I know a little about yours?" he asked. With a groan, Hawks took out his earphone and threw it into the flames. Izuku strained his senses to detect any trace of dishonesty from the young pro. "No one's listening, I'm not expecting any backup, and I'm in no position or mood to fight you. Just a friendly chat. Nothing." Since he was being so forthright, Izuku felt genuinely tempted to speak. He has never had anyone offer to talk to him about his peculiarities, no matter how resentful and furious he is. When the flames around them grew a little dimmer, Hawks realized he was getting closer. He started, "Psycho flames." He threw out his hand and blasted Hawks, who raised his arms to block but felt no heat despite being on fire. "That's what I call it. They're flames that react to my emotional state. When I'm angry, they burn with intensity. But when I'm calm," he said, "my flames are cold, and cause my enemies anxiety and fear to spike dramatically. With focus, I can control the temp regardless of what I'm feeling." Hawks touched his sleeve. "Well, it's cold, but I'm not scared." Yes, he is cautious, but not as shaky as the crooks he has battled. "Does that imply that he does not regard me as an adversary?" Hawks's temperature slightly rose as Izuku clenched his fist and said, "Neat, but there's a lot more to it than that, huh? Like, how can you negate telekinesis?" He showed by tossing a ball of fire into the air and twirling it around, saying, "My quirk has a lot of facets, I'm still figuring it out myself. One of them is pyrokinesis. Whether it's my own fire or another's, I can control it with my mind, hence the term, psycho, in my power's name." Hawks looked confused. It must have clashed with teleki and caused the waves to cancel each other out because he possesses telekinetic capabilities in his fire. Izuku snapped him out of his reverie with, "I also have sensory enhancements. I can sense the heat of anything, give myself thermal vision and detect a person's emotional state by sensing their body temperature. Which is the only reason I've been talking to you this long. I can also see and hear through the fires I've lit, which I guess makes us alike." The child was surprised to discover that he was getting closer to the bird's body. "Holy crap, man. What can't you do?" Izuku's flames dimmed a little as he glanced at the earth. When Hawks said, "Go back to who I was," his smile vanished. "This is where the vulnerability lies. Yeah, you've done some pretty messed up shit. You may be right, maybe you can't go back to your old life. It'll only get tougher from here." The wing hero then advanced on the vigilante. As the fire in his hand extinguished, Izuku glanced up at him in amazement and asked, "But who says you can't make something better?" "I'm going off my gut here, but for a stone-cold murderer, as the public are calling you, you've been a pretty calm guy to talk to. You didn't choose this path, you were pushed in a different direction. Am I right?" The kid didn't respond. He didn't have to. His eyes were covered by a waning fire, which was sufficient response. Hawks stepped forward again, but the youngster did not move. At last, he questioned in a faltering voice, "Why?" He sounded vulnerable, as if he were about to cry. Hawks slapped his forehead and said, "Why are you going this far? You could just arrest me and be done with it. Yeah, that would be easier. But easy and beneficial aren't the same thing." The fire in Izuku's eyes was quenched, and the hair over his forehead fell in unkempt, dark green curls. "You may not be a huge fan of us, but heroes do more than just hand out punishments." His voice was tight and strained, as if he was attempting to keep back something. "That hasn't been my experience." Hawks approached the youngster with 3 more steps, prepared to offer a hand. "I was aware of it. You're still a young child who feels afraid and alone in spite of everything you've done." Hawks stopped and offered the boy assistance. "I'm sorry, but there's no getting around it. You still took lives, both good and bad. Atone for your sins. Once you do that," Hawks said. Izuku stared at the hand in front of him and the man who was holding it, unable to speak. "I'm more than happy to help you build a better life." Already convinced that no one would assist him, he was determined to follow the path of a vicious vigilante. In retrospect, though, was he truly prepared to live his life in blood? He didn't dare consider the possibility of something better, even though it sounded better than seeing his blood spilled again. A single tear trickled down his cheek and onto his mouth's burning surface, which also gradually started to go away. Hawks could see a scar and freckles. Izuku raised his hand to clasp Hawks'. He would undoubtedly have to confront his past on this atonement route. His friends and family. Deserters and abusers. But if it would need that. Izuku asked abruptly, "Hey, how long have we been talking?" Which confused Hawks. To Hawks' dismay, the child hastily covered his face with green flames once more and said, "Couple minutes or so." Hawks was propelled skyward by a frigid pillar of flames before he could respond to the question, "And how long has there been a giant ring of fire in the middle of the street?" The bird screamed, "No wait," as he was blown from the fire ring. The fire grew taller and burnt more fiercely after he was extinguished. "Damn it. What on earth? I believed I was communicating with him. Why, when he knows I was serious all the way through? What would cause him to? No. No, please." Tears filled the green devil's eyes on the ground, but they quickly turned to vapor. "I apologize, but this is for your own benefit. There aren't enough feathers for you to play support." I could see the place from above as my embers rose in the sky. "He's here." He created a volcanic eruption where he stood by digging his heel into the concrete. The boy's flames transported the ripped bits of road into a dense shield, but it only withstood one strike from the red and blue blur that struck it. From above, Hawks could only watch helplessly as the situation he wished to prevent materialized. All Might's consistent punctuality in administering his brand of justice was something that another could only observe with delight. "Takami, that was such a heartwarming moment. I think I'm starting to cry." Regretfully, Izuku must be explosive in order to genuinely improve himself. As the cushioned force continued to injure him, the green devil fell back, his arms aching. In all his splendor, he looked at the massive mass of justice. As the dust settled, he remarked in a loud voice, "At last, we meet." "Green Devil," All Might said, unable to display a smile. The Green Devil returned the hateful look. "All Might. And sorrow. Dad." Bakugo shouted, "Die," while launching a flurry of massive explosives at a few training dummies. Izumi hurled her dummy at the wall nearby, shouting, "Ha!" with effort. All Might chose to do so in his agency after accepting the two as trainees. It will go much more smoothly if you have excellent training equipment and a setting that encourages them to perform at their highest level. This will only continue for the following month, after which they will start balancing homeschooling and training. With some bottles of cool water, the two took a break. With a savage smile, Katsuki sighed, "This couldn't be better." Izumi sipped her water and remarked, "Yeah, training with the #1 hero. By the time we get to UA, we'll be better than the average pro." Katsuki smiled broadly. Wiping the perspiration from his brow, the blonde clenched his hot palm and said, "Not just that. While we're here getting better every day, All Might's eventually gonna find the Green Devil and take that fucker down. I hope he doesn't die too easily, not before we've gotten a chance to pay him back." The Green Devil against All-Powerful, oh my god. I really didn't want to do this. As Hawks circled above the green conflagration, which was as tall as the buildings it was burning close to, he swore in his mind. He couldn't hope to enter the arena where All Might and the Green Devil Izuku and his stepfather were battling. Just when I was actually getting somewhere. Now, my only option is to evacuate residents from the area of danger. After losing so many feathers, it's easier said than done. Hawks listened to the devil and the symbol of peace's battle through a feather he left in the arena, while keeping a lookout for any survivors. "Damn it, Izuku, you better make it out alive." His young opponent was in his crouched battle position, and All Might had his fists by his sides. It was All Might who spoke first. "Extinguish your fire and let's converse." The boy refused to comply. He was boiling under his fiery cloak. "You come at me. Attack without doing any research, and then expect me to talk to you," he said. "Get lost." That was not going to be acceptable to All Might. "Easy now, this doesn't have to be a fight." The green devil's flames blazed brighter. Under his feet, the tar started to bubble and dissolve. His entire body was engulfed in flames as he leapt into the air, yanking his fist back and launching a fiery fist 10 times the size of his entire body. "You don't want to fight? Then get the hell away from me," he exclaimed. Not a single move was blocked by All Might. Beyond their terrible domain, the impact was felt, and everything in the vicinity washed with the heat it released. The pleasant evening air suddenly turned to a searing heat, but All Might was unfazed. The Emerald Demon lunged for All Might, who caught his arm and was shocked to see it break off in his grasp along with the rest of his body. "Trust me, son, you don't want this to get physical," All Might said. When 2 additional human-shaped flames hit All Might at once, he knew it wasn't the real him. His heat mirages. He clenched his hands at the thought. Inko mentioned these. Where is the real deal, then? Izuku was observing him through the fire clones he easily destroyed, but All Might was unaware of it. Paying close attention to every little aspect of his actions, including how his muscles clenched up and how fast he could react. All Might wasn't really battling, therefore it wouldn't be very helpful, but it may be helpful. "Stop this, boy. I'm only here to help you." All Might suddenly sensed that he was being held back by almost white-hot tendrils. They barely left burn marks on All Might's costume, but they were hot enough to melt through solid concrete. In a condensed form of Endeavor's Hell Spider, All Might was shackled from the green hell's walls by a hell spiderweb. Then, from behind him, he heard the boy's yelling voice. "You've never given me reason to believe that." The loudness and sheer hate in his voice astounded All Might. Their burning arena expanded out across the buildings, devouring everything in its path, as if in response to his cry. Green fire tendrils in hand, like the cords of a puppet, the real thing was advancing directly on him. All Might was drawn to him, and he prepared to kick him hard in the temple. Izuku was ecstatic, but All Might hardly noticed. The neighborhood was aware of the attacks, but All Might was hardly aware of them. The strikes that shattered the windows nearby and the searing heat that only grew more powerful. Hawks was alone, using his few feathers to the fullest extent possible to evacuate the citizens. All Might and Izuku were engaged in combat in the center of the green hell, which had transformed into a cyclone and was accumulating heat and oxygen. All Might was at the heart of the heat storm that was whirling them around, a representation of the seething anguish, grief, and fury that was roiling inside of Izuku. He persisted in delivering strong blows that little affected the top hero. All Might initially considered simply letting the youngster vent and exhausting himself, but he continued to grow stronger and hotter. The others down below would suffer more the longer this went on. Then All Might shook free from his restraints and cocked his hand back, as though he were destroying a real spiderweb. "Detroit." Izuku reacted swiftly, igniting jet-like flames on his feet and latching one more strand of Hellspider on All Might. He swiftly switched them such that he was in position to shoot at his blind area and All Might was aiming to punch the earth. SMAASH. Prominence burn. From the core of his body, Izuku sent a focused, vaporizing beam of heat straight toward All Might. The blonde was pushed so near to the ground that an earthquake was created when his fist struck the concrete after he completed smashing. The green devil's fire was spread farther by the tremor that tore across the region. Hawk's rear end was nearly all featherless when he evacuated the remaining evacuees. He chose a poor spot to perch, but he made sure to keep a safe distance himself. The previously damaged building from which he surveyed the region collapsed due to the combination of the burning shockwave and an earthquake causing collision. He had a twisted ankle when he came out of the wreckage. As he hobbled off the battlefield, he screamed in frustration, "Damn it, number one. What the hell are you doing?" Hawks had every reason to be angry with All Might, even though they weren't often the type to lose their temper like way. In addition to irreparably shattering any hope of a peaceful arrival from Izuku, he is now fighting a struggle that will totally undo the gains he achieved with the youngster. He could hear everything through the feathers that were going to be burned. If he hasn't already, he will eventually cause irreversible harm to his own son at this rate. All Might shook his head and got up from the ground. The top pro patted his smoking bag and said, "Damn, I didn't expect him to use Endeavor's strongest move. Or for that to hurt." In the meantime, Izuku was flying well above his elderly man. He was able to rise above the city because to the strength of the prominence burn, which was ideal for his next move. He lunged directly for his aim, attracting the blonde's attention. His grin sent the devil into a whole new level of rage. "A frontal assault, huh? Pretty brazen. Kid. He swallowed his pride and gritted his teeth. Even if using this makes me want to throw up, it's helpful. He opened his palms wide and released a substance that left All Might speechless. Explosions. Green explosions. Heat shoots green from his hands. Like. All Might's joy vanished as he remembered what this demon child had done to Katsuki and Izumi. With his explosions, the green devil whirled about, the smoke swirling around him, turning into a heat cyclone. All Might prepared for this one, tensing his muscles to take the hit without yet setting them up to block. Costly error of judgment. Now a terrible oncoming projectile with the capacity for enormous destruction. The green devil was determined to destroy the one person in his path. I hate that I'm essentially fighting you with his quirk, but whatever. Eat your heart out, Bakugo. He compressed the stored energy for a more destructive blast as he got closer to his target. Hawks, hurt on the ground, was aware of what was about to happen. He turned to face the fire he was perilously close to, envisioning the devastation the explosion would do. Shit, I can't fly and I can't run with this busted ankle. He's not going to make it through something like that. Nevertheless, he smiled casually in response to it. I'm dead, man. He waited for death's blazing embrace, thinking, oh well, at least an explosion is a cool way to go out. However, it never materialized. He felt the wind on his wings instead. When he opened his eyes, he realized that he was above the ground and being swiftly lifted out of the green conflagration. What the devil? He was shocked by what he saw when he turned to face his back. On his back were two green flame wings. The fire on his back was cold and soothing in the face of this oppressive heat. This boy. Hawks thought as the person he was trying to save saved him. Izuku found it in himself to care for someone else despite the fact that he was fighting for his life. Boom. Other buildings in the city were engulfed and reduced to ash and cinders by the loud impact of a green super explosion. The enormity of the explosion caused Hawks' eyes to widen. To fuel his blast, he rotated himself with his hands blasts, collecting oxygen and heat in a smoky cyclone. He re-entered the considerably greater whirlwind of heat and oxygen, as if that weren't enough. The explosion of a human missile in the depths of hell. The outcome was unimaginable destruction. Green embers and smoke were rising, everything was turning to ash, and there were no signs of life. On All Might, it appeared as though 3 nukes had been dropped in one location. However, Hawks was more worried about Izuku. The apocalyptic blast blew him back, and he collapsed to the ground. His concern increased when the wings that had brought him to safety vanished. 2 figures at ground zero were visible as the smoke and dust started to disperse. 2 of the only living things for a mile or more. A toddler whose smoking arm was supported by an absurdly muscular man who was puffing from burns and smoke residue. He scowled at the youngster who had shoved him farther than most villains had, wiping any fun or lightheartedness from his features. That explosion was disastrous. That was more than Katsuki could match. This child used the experience of one battle to soar to new heights. With his hoodie burned and the wounds on his arms, chest, and back all visible, the boy in his hands was hanging by the arm like a rag doll. The symbol of peace was devastated to see a kid so damaged, but before lowering his defenses, he had to certain that the threat was eliminated. You're something else, you know that? That attack of yours, it stung much more than I was expecting. I should have blocked it. Izuku's ears pricked up. But I'm afraid you're finished, Green Devil. All Might's chest heaved, indicating that his opponent was still conscious. Something prevented him from giving him a chop to the nape of his neck. All Might paused as the youngster begged for air. All Might didn't realize it, but that was the worst thing he could have said. We'll talk about all this later, son. Whoosh. The Green Devil appeared to be resurrected, as green flames returned with a vengeance. With enough fire to sear the pro's sleeve off, he encompassed All Might's entire arm and said, "Don't you dare." Oh wow wow. Somehow, his flames are growing hotter. This boy, what is he? He had the chance to deliver a powerful burst of heat at All Might's chest at close range after being forced to drop the boy. Don't you dare, he cried in a seemingly uncontrollable rage. All Might's half-bared torso emitted smoke as he was transported back. Now, a genuinely evil thing had taken the place of the child who had come before him. Combat boots and ragged black jeans. Upper body scarred and bare. His fists were lighted by flames that formed a cross across his chest. Over his eyes, the flames flared rapidly, obscuring the orbs themselves behind an opaque green covering. A pair of fiery wings on his back was the most recent addition to his appearance. With the intention of punching the Green Devil to sleep, All Might replied, "I'm sorry, but this ends here before you can ruin any more lives." The Green Devil charged directly toward All Might, screaming, "Hypocrite! and he did it with animal savagery. He's gone crazy. All Might swung his fist, thinking. And failed to make it. Once more, he swung. Not found. The Green Devil avoided every final blow, and every swing missed. All Might was unaware that the demon was observing and analyzing him. Predicting his pattern, he was using it to close the distance. His amazing fighting sense was still intact as the roaring creature came toward him. He can therefore go closer, but I'm willing to bet that he only has one more chance. Afterward, he's done. How unexpectedly wise. Best Might was right and realized that this last attack would be pointless even if the devil gave it his best. But a decade ago. Wah. So gross. Izumi and Izuku both screamed at the unsightly scar on their new stepfather. Toshinori rolled down his shirt and lifted the toddlers in his arms, saying, I know, pretty gross, right? Ha ha ha. But the look on your faces was priceless. Young Izuku said, Hey, Toshi. How'd you get that scary mark? A couple of 4-year-olds wouldn't notice, but Toshinori gave a somewhat aloof glance before responding. The twins instantly became happier when I asked, Say, have you two ever heard of All Might? Yeah. The best hero ever. He's the coolest in the universe. Toshi laughed. Well kids, just last year, All Might and a team of police fought this big bad villain. Even All Might, the hero who never loses, struggled against him. I did everything I could to help him. He won of course, but the cost was pretty great. Toshinori embraced the two children and they embraced one another. Izumi responded, It's okay, you and All Might won. Toshinori glanced down at tiny Izuku and said, Yeah, that bad guy's not here to hurt you anymore, Dad. His heart missed a beat. With a kind expression on his face, the youngster stroked Toshinori's scar through his shirt. With a single tear streaming down his cheek, the slender, blonde guy tenderly hugged the youngster. Now that formerly kind boy was now shaped into a vicious, angry creature. That was partly because his own father was trying to control him. Izuku's left hand exploded, bringing him to a screeching halt directly next to All Might's left side before he could place his big hand on his kid. No, you don't. All Might scraped Izuku's right face with another strike. All Might's hand was covered with blood, and the boy's face was slashed open. Toshinori Yagi. When his real name was mentioned, the heavy mass of muscle froze. Only a chosen handful and the greatest heroes are aware of this moniker. Taking advantage of the financial delay, Izuku rapidly compressed his right arm with all of his remaining strength. His arm appeared to be a blazing appendage, poised to wreak unimaginable havoc on the one and only vulnerability of All Might. You will reap everything you've sown, Jet Buurrrrnnn. Boom. Hawks was shocked to hear another huge green explosion reverberating over the city. You must be joking with me. What's that kid's remaining fuel supply? He witnessed something being blasted away by the wave out of the detonation. Hawks's last wing was directed toward the general area where it would land when his eyes followed it. He needed to go check on All Might right now. Finding the top hero in a crater was an excruciatingly tedious journey, made worse by a damaged ankle and a lack of feathers. A series of coughs followed Hawk's statement, I hope that was worth it, big guy. I heard most of what went down, what the heck? He turned to face All Might once more and saw that he was kneeling with his fist to his mouth. His own blood was all over his fist. Suddenly, Hawks felt a mixture of wonder and horror. All Might's suit had a terrible, enormous bloodstain on the left side, and it was singed. He took advantage of All Might's injury. Knowing about it, he brought the top hero to his knees with a single, well-placed shot. Izuku. When criminals and the general public learn of this, the world's greatest hero will fail. The entire society will collapse. In the meantime, Izuku was mimicking Hawks's peculiarity and floating through the air. Wings that aren't really fierce. All Might was flung a considerable distance away in addition to suffering actual injury from the intensity of the explosive hit from his flashfire fist. But Izuku started to realize how exhausted his body was as the adrenaline started to wear off. Smoke was leaking from various areas of him as he fell clumsily to the floor of a narrow, dark lane. His right hand was the most severely damaged. The scars were emitting blood and smoke. He had the sensation of lead being taken out of a furnace. The only thing he could do was crawl. His eyes were blurry, his ears were ringing, and he was not in a position to protect himself from the oncoming figure. As he got closer, a raspy voice said, My, wasn't that something? He was a reasonably tall, slender man with sunglasses, a mask to conceal his face, and a dark navy hoodie that covered his hair. The man stopped a few paces away from Izuku, who was assessing him with what little consciousness he still had, and said, I wasn't sure what to expect from that fight. You sure gave number 1 and number 3 a hell of a workout. He sounds nearly ecstatic. At the sight of the Green Devil, no normal person would behave in such a casual manner. Is he a bad guy? Izuku attempted to stand up, but was unsuccessful. I could be in serious trouble here. He needed to rest because he had already overexerted himself. The man pulled back his sweatshirt to show off his black hair, which was spiked. Easy kid, you're strong but you gotta know when to toe the line, he said. He took off his sunglasses and said, I'm just here 'cause I wanted to introduce myself. Who knows when we'll get another chance? Izuku could see purple patches under his eyes in his half-awakened state. Gotta say, it's a real pleasure, Green Devil. Izuku found himself wanting his body to move even more, which heightened his sense of danger. However, he was unable to. The man's head turned and he saw something coming in from the entrance to the alley. He saw a bunch of red feathers scouting the area and thought, TCH, damn bird. Izuku blacked out after experiencing a wave of tremendous heat. What had happened over the past 3 weeks was unbelievable. The Green Devil is a vigilante threat. The boy was sent to be cared for by a number of high heroes, but none of them succeeded. But nobody was really worried. They thought that All Might will stop him. They mistakenly thought that no one stands a chance against All Might. The world must have been shocked when their wall of hope failed to protect the young terror as well. The Green Devil escaped when their combat ended in a tie, doing what thousands of criminals could only hope to do: harm All Might. People continued to hold out hope since they thought All Might was not a genuine fighter. That the next time, he would tear the Green Devil's limbs off. However, they were mistaken. The world was unaware of All Might's previously disclosed stomach injury. He lost a lot of his fighting strength and his body was badly weakened. The Green Devil, meanwhile, appears to be becoming stronger every day. And after he recovers, that fiasco with All Might will undoubtedly propel him to new heights. His strength comes from what doesn't kill him. The reality was obvious, regardless of what the world wished to believe. Their symbol of peace left the battle injured after losing. There are still Green Devils out there. When criminals learned about this, they were immensely motivated to take action. The loss of their champion appalled the law enforcement community. A new era is approaching. A terrible time. The dreamscape of Izuku in front of the terrifying building he used to call home. Izuku remained still. The terrible memories within these walls appeared to go on forever. He started to walk away, but something stopped him. He felt a hand on his shoulder. He noticed Toshinori when he turned around. TCH, bastard. He attempted to back away, but the man refused to move. Then Izuku sensed Inko's touch on his other shoulder again. He shouted, "Let go of me," instead. At last, he sensed 2 sets of hands snatching his arms. Since they were from Izumi and Katsuki, these were the worst. Izuku was now frantically attempting, but failing, to shake them all off. According to Katsuki, useless Deku, Izumi said, embarrassing little brother. Angrily, Inko answered, not right now. Toshinori said, we'll talk later, Izuku. As the greenette struggled mightily to escape their grasp, their words reverberated through his skull. The child was on the verge of tears when those harsh, agonizing remarks were shouted at him one after another. What appeared in front of his eyes was the last straw. All Might, in all his vile deceit, was 20 feet tall. It's over, son. Weakly, Izuku murmured, shut up. Katsuki said, what was that, nerd? Izumi said, got something to say? Both Toshi and Inko said, be quick. Izuku said, a little louder, shut up. Green flames started to rise around them. His family screamed in rage and hugged him more tightly, causing him pain. Izuku continued to yell, shut up. Shut up. As the flames that spread to the home grew gradually higher, he finally shrieked, shut up, as green flames shot out of his arms and back, destroying Bakugo and the Yagi and nearly engulfing the entire region in flames. The enormous form of All Might, hovering over him, reached down horribly slowly to seize Izuku. Everything burned as Izuku's body exploded in a dazzling explosion of flame. Shoot p. The truth, Izuku was so sweaty that he almost sprung out of bed. His heart was pounding out of his chest, and he was breathing heavily. Shit. What a horror. He became sufficiently calm to be able to see his surroundings. It appeared to be a medical facility. He was wearing a robe and could hear medical equipment beeping. What the? He turned to face himself. He had bandages on his head, neck, arms, and chest. The right cheek has a patch. The most bandaged part of his body was his right arm. How am I in a hospital? What took place? I've been here for how long? The door opened abruptly. Well, look who's still kicking. A brisk voice interrupted his reverie. A recognizable voice stated, "He's awake? He's been out longer than I thought." One that almost stopped Izuku's heart. He noticed the number 3 and number 6 heroes, Hawks and Mirko, at the door to his chamber. The words that came out of Izuku's lips were raspy, choking coughs. "You've been out for 2 days, kid. I was starting to think you were dead." Mirko placed a mask-like device that was attached to a phone to his face and said, "Easy, you're gonna have to take it easy on the talking. Here." The artificial voice said, "Use that to talk. Try it," after he typed a few phrases. What the hell is going on? Izuku was concerned that Teleki and All Might would be following him home when he noticed the heroes. Or that perhaps they had figured out that he was actually the Green Devil. But they raised whatever issues he was personally concerned about. As though they were unaware that the vigilante and the missing youngster were the ones causing him so much trouble. Izuku confusedly glanced at the bunny hero and said, "That's what we're here to ask you, Toya." "Toya?" Mirko simply gave a nod. Izuku was even more perplexed when he heard his friend say, "That's what your name was." "My pal, what are you talking about?" Hawks filled in a few of the details. He revealed that this black-haired man had appeared with a white-haired child who was asleep and had multiple burns following the Green Devil's battle with All Might. He introduced them to Toya, the boy's name. Hawks and Mirko had just arrived on the scene to assist the remaining survivors in reaching safety. Before Hawks could gather any more information, the youngster vanished as Mirko snatched him in her powerful arms. Izuku noticed that his hair was completely snow-white as he looked at his phone's reflection. He touched it tenderly. The man from the alley. This must have been his doing. Why did he cover for me? He typed up a tale while organizing his ideas. That guy. I don't know him, but he and I were in the area. I remember a huge explosion, a raspy voice, passing out from insane heat, and now here I am. On his chin, Hawks placed his hand. Toya simply shook his head when asked, "You sure you don't know anything about this man?" Mirko replied, "Well, he sure seemed to know you," as she picked up a big yellow bag. Izuku concluded that they hadn't investigated it when he said, "Dropped off your stuff and everything." He would have been in chains if they had seen the notebook he filled with entries on himself and his adventures. He was given takeaway from a local restaurant by the heroes who were caring for him. The child didn't need food poisoning from the hospital after everything he had gone through. Hawks and Mirko continued questioning Toya as they were eating. He denied having any family when asked. He claimed to have fire as a quirk when questioned about it. His body required time to heal, therefore he would not demonstrate. His eyes brightened a little when they told him that the Green Devil had taken All Might to the hospital. Hawks was not unaware of that. Eventually, shouting broke up their dinner. Toya was left alone to finish his supper and reflect while Hawks and Mirko went to look into it. "Toya. Does the person who found me have that name? I'm not sure if he's an ally or an enemy." He spoke as though he had been observing me. "Is he one of the guys from All for One?" Izuku grabbed his own notebook from his yellow bag and said, "There's so much I don't know. They burned the cover. However, I feel like I'll see him again." In the meantime, Endeavor shouted at the detective, "Tsukachi, what am I doing here? With this cornucopia of failures?" The detective, who was obviously upset, stated, "First off, this is a hospital. Keep it down." Mirko responded, "I have the same question," as she entered. "Why is the only one of us who didn't get off their fat, lazy ass here? What did you say, rabbit?" Tsukachi shouted over them both, "Okay, enough." Endeavor sneered, "We are not here to get at each other's throats." Mirko told her, "That's a good idea," while clenching her knuckles. "Go for the throat." She attempted to choke Endeavor, but the detective stopped her. Endeavor's patience finally gave out. "Enough? We're here to discuss strategy," she exclaimed. Tsukachi said in exasperation, "What strategy? Kill the demon on sight. That's the plan. Plain and simple." Despite everything that transpired, Endeavor continued to show no signs of taking this seriously. "Tell that to All Might," replied Tsukachi. "The one who fell to some kid with cheap imitations of my techniques? Happily, he failed because his softness made him take it easy on the boy. I won't make the same mistake." Mirko was just yelling. As the Rabbit and Flame heroes scowled at one another, they said, "Of course, beating up kids is your area of expertise." Tsukachi let out a frustrated sigh and said, "Just come with us." He led the walking conflagration to the patient's room who had just been roused. A window was open and the room was unoccupied when Tsukachi opened the door. There are no personal possessions or patients visible. The speaking device on the bed was all that remained. Hawks said, "And he's gone." Mirko complained, "Too hurt to use his quirk, my ass." Endeavor felt angry and let down. He turned and stormed out of the room, saying, "You slackers. That's 2 measly runts you can't keep a hold of. I'm done wasting my time," he was shouted back at by Mirko. Endeavor halted at that description, saying, "Fine, guess I'll have to find that white-haired, burned kid myself." To Endeavor's back, Mirko declared, "I'll make it my priority," because he was pretty bummed about being abandoned. What was his name again? I think it was Crash. Endeavor screamed, "Tuya!" as he soared out the window. Mirko smiled inside. Hawks questioned this. Was it worth it? The bird then picked up Toya's speaking device and said, "Totally." His dejection since All Might's battle with the Green Devil had been unusual. He felt a glimmer of optimism when he noticed a message placed on the smartphone. In the meantime, standing on the hospital's roof, Izuku enjoyed the cool sensation of the breeze on his skin. He checked his backpack and discovered Mirko's throat meds. Taking out his notebook, he looked at the burn damage. He combed his white hair with his fingers. It made him think of Rei. "Toya. Thank you." Something was poking out from the corner of Izuku's book. When he took it out, the sight left him gasping for air. One of the feathers of Hawks. He pretended to be ignorant while knowing. He is still attempting to convince me to turn myself in and to protect me. Hawks. One tear started to well up in his eye. He desired to return inside. To become the wing hero himself. However, he was unable to. This Toya and All for One. Izuku had time to reflect. The genius behind All for One has plenty of pawns. What he is capable of is unknown. He still doesn't know who he is, but he's not taking any chances. Toya. Furthermore, he is unwilling to allow someone else he has grown to care about to suffer because of him. He clenched his fist around his snow-white hair, strained his vocal cords, and addressed the feather. "Don't come for me, for your sake and mine." He flung aside the ashes after burning the feather in his hand. "I witnessed it. Because of me and All Might, you almost died. Because you gambled on me." It was similar to Rei. "No one I care about will be lost." He sprang from the roof and hovered in front of an open window to make sure that. He noticed Hawks clutching the speaking device while seated on the bed. There was nothing to see when he peered behind him. "I'll keep my distance." Hawks was listening to the message left behind as he flew farther and farther away. "In 10 days, the Demon Lord is planning something." Hawks touched his face. "This is a warning. SHT. He was also contacted by All for Ones. Even worse, All Might has been hurt and is once more on his own. Izuku, I'll continue to search for you even if you don't want me to." In other places in the shadows, a man grinning was wearing black hair and pieces of nasty purple skin held together with medical staples. "Kid, don't count on me to save you again. This simply benefited us both. I get to make fun of Endeavor, and you don't have to return to your awful family." Additionally, somewhere a tunnel of luminous tubes was traversed by a man wearing a lab coat. A strange voice cut through the mad doctor's goggles, revealing the eyes of a deranged madman. He. "Not much longer until your first test drive, my children. And your playmate. We'll dismantle them. As powerful as these creations are, Doctor, they lack the strength to properly push the lad into a corner. The upper tier and high ends are far from finished, and all we've got are mid and lower tiers. Not nearly enough." The medical equipment floated next to the imposing boss as he rose from his throne. "Izuku Yagi has grown far beyond anything you or I could have predicted, going so far as to fight All Might to a draw. And he has already spread word to the heroes of his planning to test these creations. We'll leave them to play with a few sidekicks, give the boy a chance to rest and recuperate." Half of the master's face was in the purple light of a test tube, and he smiled as the doctor asked, "If that's the case, will we refrain from testing him?" He smiled sickeningly and added, "I never said that." An ear, an eye, and a hair were missing, and the left side of his face was an unidentifiable jumble of scarred tissue above his upper lip. He had a single functional blood-red eye, an untidy short white hair, and a horizontal scar across his cheek on the right side of his face. "Izuku Yagi has proven to be far beyond our Nomu, but let's see if he can match a more colossal task in 4 months' time." The hospital room of Rei, the white-haired woman, was caring for her favorite flowers and the potted fern that was sitting on the window sill. She gives the green plant lots of attention, watering it and ensuring it gets plenty of sunshine every morning and evening. She watered the plant with a sad expression in her eyes. Knock. When the door to her room opened, Rei remained seated and silent. At her entry stood a nurse carrying a tray of food. She said, "Rei, your dinner." The cold woman did not respond to her. The nurse put the tray on Rei's bed and said, "I'll set it down." Rei said without emotion, "Thank you." Prior to departing, The nurse saw a file and an image of a man with green eyes, freckles, short curling black hair, and a kind, hospitable grin. Hisashi Midoriya, the hospital's departed nurse. The man who was quite similar to Zu. Rei hadn't seen or spoken to the scarred green-haired boy in weeks. She longs for their conversations, meals together, and stargazing evenings. She wished she had a visiting son. Rei had been withdrawn for weeks, hardly speaking or interacting with others. Rei flinched as the nurse replied, "I'm sorry." Rei sighed and set down her watering can, saying, "You were worried about Zu, and wanted to make sure he was safe, but you could have been hurt even worse in the Green Devil's fight with Teleki." The nurse was taken aback and said, "Don't. I should be apologizing." Rei used more than 2 words for the first time in weeks. Nurse fumbled with her fingers and said, "I'm sorry, I made you worry, but you shouldn't be saying sorry to me." From her window, Rei gazed across the street at the building that was almost complete, rebuilt from Teleki's demolition in rage. Rei didn't feel sorry for the pro, even though she knew the Green Devil had taken her to the hospital. Or any professional who has abused or neglected their child in the past. Teleki was solely responsible for the damage that was done to the area. It wasn't until she provoked him that the Green Devil became active. Zu might be so terrified of her that he never returns, or worse. Because of this, Rei is becoming resentful of her own husband and harbors a grudge toward the so-called hero. She thought cruelly, that woman is no better than him. Her question caused Rei's nurse to flinch a little. "He's been here, hasn't he? Multiple times." "Why yes, but only twice." Rei was both fascinated and extremely disturbed. Since her collapse all these years ago, he had never even been close to her. She wasn't very bothered by this fact. It was a little freeing to be away from him, even if she was locked in a tiny room in a mental hospital. Among other reasons, the doctors believed it was better to keep Rei in the dark about her husband's visits. However, once you've had a man inside of you, you can sense his approach. There was a sense of dread on the streets these days. Since All Might became the most popular hero, the decline in professionals on the street and the rise in crime caused individuals to begin to genuinely fear. How did the conflict between the man and the vigilante that caused a sensation end? 2 professionals were hurt, entire city blocks were turned to cinders, and the Emerald Demon was still present. The heroes received a tip about something else shortly after that disaster. 3 humanoid monsters, all black and gray, with exposed brains and little to no mental ability. All of this simply served to increase public anxiety. The devil first, then zombies. Vampires, what next? After school, 3 middle schoolers were strolling down the street. 2 in a floating uniform, that is. A black-haired boy with sharp teeth and a female with pink complexion. The boy and the invisible girl were expressionless, but Pinky's face was dreamy, gazing off into space. The unseen girl told the lad, "Your turn." He tugged the pink girl's collar, nearly suffocating her, and said, "On it." Then Mina pouted and screamed, "What the heck, Kirishima? You tell us. That's the 3rd time we've had to save you from either jaywalking or getting run over." "Usually both." The girl who was invisible said. Mina folded her arms and sighed. Both Kirishima and Invisible Girl smiled, though it was invisible, as they said, "If you must know, I was thinking about the guy who saved me from the dreaded summer school." Mina's pranks gave her pals a reason to laugh in a society that was collapsing. "You keep talking about this Zu guy. Just ask him out already," Kirishima replied. Mina moaned, "I haven't seen him since our study dates." The invisible girl inquired, "You didn't get his number?" "He was playing hard to get. But, the next time I see him, I better get an apology and compensation." "Compensation? How?" Mina laughed devilishly. "We'll see." Kirishima abruptly threw his classmates into an open shop. Where they were, a canister of explosives fell, causing a crater in the ground. The steel doors closed and rolled down. A truck carrying crooks brandishing guns was seen rushing down the street by them and the other people who were stuck inside the store. Criminal motorcyclists hurling bombs bordered the truck on both sides. "Fucking rage, boys." The leader atop the vehicle exclaimed as he fired randomly and laughed. "If the pros are getting taken down by children, the streets are as good as ours. Even All Might is off our backs. It's too good. Nah man. I hope we run into All Might. So we can pump that bastard full of lead." This is what occurs when God bleeds. People's faith falters. The sharks are here now that the water is bloody. The Green Devil was hidden from the public eye, watching from above the road rage. He was willing to fight even though his body was still healing after the battle with All Might. There was one obvious variation in the healing of his throat. There was a hint of gravel in his deeper voice. Something he sensed in the distance prevented him from landing and putting an end to the commotion. He had a sensation of rapid heat and ambitious. He observed a blazing orange streak scorching up the sky ahead of the criminals. The group of lawbreakers was eliminated in a single blow. Smoldering goons littered the ground, as orange flames encircled the totaled vehicle and motorcycles. It was a brutal but successful strategy, demonstrating that the hero in question was not in the mood for compromises. As the second hero, Endeavor, emerged from the flames, the populace applauded. Everyone applauded as they saw him in all his imposingness. All save one. Izuku gave the so-called hero a hateful, contemptuous gaze. Rei and his unofficial therapist, Fuyumi, had told him a lot about Endeavor and his home life. According to the latter, he prioritizes his favorite child over all other family members. That when his other children needed him in their youth, he essentially forgot about them and abandoned them. Stories of domestic terrorism abuse and the mistreatment of the youngest to fulfill his ambitions for fame and power came from Rei. When they told each other about their pasts, she cried more than he did. She was never able to utter the name of their first child, especially when she mentioned him. The sight of the unabashed man's victory made the Green Devil shudder with increasing rage. Both flame quirk users blazed up as their eyes finally met. The local temperature rose significantly. Everyone in their vicinity fled immediately. Endeavor gazed up at the young vigilante, the flames on his face and chest growing more visible. Izuku's face began to burn more intensely, and he created green fire on his hands. His rage, which he believed only his family could arouse, blazed down at him. Green Devil. Endeavor. Pulling his hand back, the flame hero shot off the ground and flew over the green flame. Izuku followed suit, keeping his feet firmly planted. They were thrown backwards by a blast caused by the collision of large waves of red and green flames. Despite their stunning displays of firepower, neither appeared to have worn down at all. Hovering in the air, Izuku confronted the jerk. Endeavor remarked without admiration, "So you've got a substantial amount of power." Izuku snarled, "Don't sell me short, Endeavor." He was monitoring Endeavor's elevated body temperature as soon as he got there in order to gauge his emotional state. He was able to distinguish between self-interest and care for others. Both of these emotions were palpable to him in the flame hero. Endeavor swung a fire fist at the youngster, saying, "I'm not as friendly as those fools, Hawks and All Might. If you want to live, then answer me." Izuku immediately absorbed the heat and redirected it into a cross of flames. Although he was unable to completely control someone else's flames, he could quickly sidestep strong assaults and claim some of the power for himself. Endeavor's rage drove him to push and battle, even though he was in some ways a bad match for the Green Devil. "What did you do to Toya? Where is he?" Izuku tried to hide his fear with anger, but the question astonished him. The demon retorted, "Who the hell is that?" Endeavor unleashed another volley of flames in rage. "This Toya, whoever he is obviously related to the Todoroki family. A relative." Endeavor snatched Izuku's collar and flung him to the ground, interrupting his thoughts. Izuku landed in a crouch without any discomfort by using his power. He landed directly in front of a shop with steel roll-down doors that were closed. There were 3 people in the store when he spoke. Kirishima muttered, "Holy crap, it's the Green Devil," while shouting. Mina shoved him away, saying, "Move. Let me see." Invisible Girl shouted from behind, "Don't approach the door. He's fighting Endeavor, we'll get melted." Izuku was about to take off again on the battlefield when he was halted by a well-known figure. He noticed 2 distinct black and yellow eyes looking through the door's gaps behind him. His heat subsided as his eyes grew wide. Ashido? He also saw that she was hiding with other people. When Endeavor charged at him, he was tempted to melt the door and meet her face to face, but he refrained. Izuku swiftly erected a wall of fire to keep the conflagration from advancing directly on him. Unbeknownst to him, Endeavor was putting the people behind the boy in risk. Izuku's rage swiftly returned. Recklessly fighting without regard for onlookers. "You are just as stupid as All Might, and you were mistaken. However, perhaps you can at least help me." His first words, "Endeavor," caught the man's attention. "Tell me everything you know about All for One." The flame hero registered the question, but confusion crept into his thoughts. It gave Izuku a chance to push back against the man. Kirishima questioned, "Whoa, did he just protect us?" Mina answered, "Yeah, he was looking straight at me." Kirishima's expression was deadpan as she asked, "Do you think he thinks I'm cute?" "I don't think now is the time for that." The Green Devil sought answers regarding All for One, while Endeavor was now the target of the charge. With a wave of orange flames behind him, Endeavor kicked the lad above him and exclaimed, What the hell are you blathering about? Izuku clenched his jaw in exasperation. His exact words, how disappointing. I should have asked All Might when I had the chance. We're sure to send Endeavor into a tailspin. The slightest jab at his pride would make him go mad if his ego was anything like Bakugo's or Yagi's. When the man exploded like a volcano, his suspicion was validated. He roared, "Shut your mouth," as he shot straight for the Emerald Beast. Jet burn. Flashfire fist. Endeavor exposed himself to a strong blow to the abdomen, which sent him flying to a different structure. Endeavor's first priority was immediately apparent. It would demonstrate to the public who the true #1 hero is by taking down the vigilante that even All Might was unable to stop. Devoured by ego and destroyed out of self-interest. Endeavor left a man-shaped crater in the wall and pulled himself out. He dabbed at the blood trickling down his brow. He glanced over his shoulder to see his opponent appear with two enormous green fire wings on his back, resembling hawks. With his arms folded across his chest and his quirk flared up, he growled, "Grr. Your sloppy imitations are nothing compared to the real thing." The green devil flew directly at him, not at all intimidated. Hellspider. 10-finger-thin ropes of blazing hot fire were launched by Endeavor, and they sliced through the buildings with ease. Izuku skillfully avoided and swerved around them. He avoided being cut like sushi, but he continued to concentrate on Endeavor. "2, you're just as scum as they are." As his flames grew, Izuku thought in rage. Pulling his right arm off into a broad flaming sword, he reached back to his left wing. Like Asta, sort of with startled eyes, Endeavor saw him cut through his Hellspider and fly directly for him. "You're only thinking about your own goals. You disregard everyone else and only see what you want to see. You're an even bigger jerk than the criminals you imprison." What irritates me the most, though. Endeavor lunged forward, prepared to burn the young powerhouse alive, but he stopped as he said the next thing. "Rei, you hurt, burn in hell, Enji Todoroki." Izuku had more than enough time to lift his blazing sword above Endeavor's head and swing it down on his shoulder during the brief moment that Endeavor hesitated. A great blast drove the bastard crashing into the earth, and he howled in pain. Izuku was standing above him, his sword stuck in his shoulder, blood and smoke streaming from the wound, the man being charred from the inside out. "He's got enough heat in his power to scorch me. How, at such a young age, can his firepower match mine?" The demon kicked Endeavor off and sent him flying when he tried to utilize his working arm. Pulling back his blazing right arm, he yelled, "How's this for a sloppy imitation?" The result was a huge fist of fire that struck Endeavor, sending him flying into the half-melted road. The expert grasped his left shoulder and raised himself up. Izuku started to generate and condense a tremendous amount of thermal energy while folding his wings over himself and crossing his arms over his chest. Endeavor recognized this and sped toward the direction of the green sphere of flame, which continued to heat and brighten. He hurled a comparatively feeble stream of flames at the youngster, but it was ineffective. "Stop it, you fiend!" he exclaimed. Indeed, the last strike appeared to be fueled by the orange and green flames blending together. Endeavor's eyes widened as he was nearly paralyzed, and not from terror, but from something more. Flashfire fist. Prominence BUUUURRRNNN. Endeavor's strongest move was launched by the Green Devil in his own form. Rather than directing a focused beam from the middle of his body toward his target, he sent off a tremendous explosion that burned everything in its path. Endeavor was unable to halt it and was down an arm. All he could do was brace himself and pray that he wouldn't be consumed by these awful flames. With a twitching motion, Endeavor took tiny breaths. When he opened his eyes, he was on a gurney. Beside him, a sardonic voice murmured, "Oh good, you're alive." It originated with Mirko, the rabbit hero. On his opposite side, Hawks remarked, "I guess your blaze of glory will have to wait for another day." Endeavor wished he was in a coma because of his two animal pals. He noticed something he would like not to see when he looked forward. There was only cinders and ash as far as the eye could see, and the updraft was blowing away the collapsed buildings. He was reminded of that chilly day on Sokoto Peak. "Don't worry," Tsukachi approached Endeavor and said. Despite the doctor's advice to take it easy, Endeavor made himself sit up. "As far as we can tell, everyone in the area was safely evacuated. The only casualties are the rampaging criminals you stopped." He made himself say, "Where is he?" Hawks peered off into the distance. Mirko placed her arms behind her head and said, "Couldn't find him anywhere. Mirko and I were alerted later by the news, and my feathers are still growing." The flame hero snarled but was unable to deny his defeat. "Wait to let that measly runt beat you and escape, number 2. After he was criticizing everyone else for not stopping this threat, It was much more embarrassing. And he was most likely miles away by now. Whoosh. Strong green flames erupted from a heap of debris, grabbing everyone's attention. Everyone thought, oh shit. Prior to Endeavor's awakening, Izuku lay with his back to the wall, gasping for air. He was utilizing his flames to prevent the building from collapsing in on itself, and he was smoldering in some areas. Izuku felt that this was the only building containing people during his battle with Endeavor, and he took all necessary precautions to prevent everyone from being crushed. He discovered a small group of people who were still alive but bloody and comatose. Then he checked the exit. Izuku felt something at his feet but was unable to see it, so he halted. He noticed an arm and leg behind a pillar after switching to thermal vision. A quirk of invisibility. He walked around the pillar and noticed a woman wearing a middle school uniform. He scooped her up gently and looked at the damage. He had to run his hand over her skin to feel for any bleeding because he couldn't see the wounds. It's not too bad, but she still needs medical care. Then he detected 2 more traces of heat. He moved to the last 2 wounded villagers and picked up the invisible girl. One was a boy who was unconscious and bleeding. He nearly dropped the imaginary girl after the last one, which broke his heart. Her left arm was crushed by a large piece of rubble, and her hair and skin were pink and covered in dry blood. Aishido. He promptly pulled the piece off the pinkette and placed the invisible girl down beside the boy. Frantically, he examined her, verifying that she had several scrapes and bruises and that her arm was fractured. Izuku felt guilty at the sight of it all. Once more, his presence caused harm to someone he cared about. Tears poured into Aishido's fluffy hair and down his cheeks. He placed her down and apologized in silence. Izuku looked out before he left. Paramedics were nowhere to be seen, and Endeavor remained unconscious. He couldn't abandon these wounded people for an indeterminate amount of time. Izuku tightened his fist and moaned. He retrieved his first aid kit and unpacked his luggage. Kirishima rolled over a little and moaned. After forcing himself to sit, he regained his vision and looked around. He moaned as he used his bandaged arm to grasp his bandaged chest. He questioned, "Wah? What happened?" He heard a harsh voice say, "I can tell you." The sight of the green devil, complete with green flames, made Kirishima leap. He exclaimed, "Holy shit. It's you." Izuku sat next to an empty first aid kit box and simply waved. The devil nodded and said, Did you patch me up?" He said that he had done the same for his classmates. Despite Kirishima's intense concern for them, the demon reassured him that they were stable and would soon awaken. Kirishima was not sure how to respond to the question. "You were less injured than they were. Do you have some kind of durability quirk?" But he looked at what the monster that everyone feared had done. "He doesn't appear to be a villain at all. He stayed to make sure we were all right and even bandaged us. In fact, he is quite macho." Izuku saw Kirishima grit his teeth in annoyance. "My quirk is hardening. I hardened my skin to take the debris better. It's kind of a weak quirk though, nothing on yours. If it were stronger, I could have been a shield for these people," Kirishima said. "Sounds like you want to be a hero," he said. "You're not going to get to where you want by just wishing and crying. Improve yourself, get stronger, you have a lot of potential, and I don't just mean your quirk." When the man who had admitted multiple heroes to the hospital offered him words of encouragement, Kirishima looked surprised. "Besides having potential to be an unbreakable wall, you're also brave and selfless. You're frustrated because you lack the ability to help these people. That alone means you're hero material. I've seen my share of hero aspirants, but you're the only one I've seen attempt to help others instead of seeking glory. You may not want to hear this from someone like me, but..." Izuku lit his fist on fire and lightly struck Kirishima's brow. It wasn't chilly, and it didn't burn. There was a cozy warmth. "You can become a hero." The boy with the dark hair gazed with lustrous eyes. "All right, yes sir," he exclaimed warmly. Under his fire mask, Izuku grinned and withdrew his fist. He had no idea that he would be making motivational talks or becoming a role model. The youngster reminded him of himself, and he wanted to express to him what he so desperately needed to hear. "I might have ended up quite differently if someone had told me that." With a grunt, Mina and the invisible girl began to move. Because of her arm in a homemade sling, the pink one was unable to clutch their heads. Kirishima pointed and said, "Oh wow wow wow. What happened?" When the females turned to face the green devil seated in front of them, he said, "He can tell you." He said, "Hello." Toru and Mina both flinched in shock and terror. "It's okay, he's a good guy. Look, he patched us up with his own first aid kit," Kirishima replied. Toru examined herself and noticed bandages and patches on her arms and legs, saying, "Whoa, seriously," she said. "Why you can see me?" The demon gave a nod. Toru blushed as she said, to an extent. I can make out your figure at least with thermal vision. Izuku could see the heat rising in her face. She kind of wanted to ask how she appeared to him, despite the doubt that was roiling inside of her. Mina taunted, he, someone's got an admirer, Izuku laughed. Says the one wearing my hoodie is a sling. Toru and Kirishima's jaws fell, and Mina's face became violet at that. They said, that's your hoodie. Izuku covered his chest and back with his flames in a cross pattern the entire time. I had to use something for her arm. Why did you think I was shirtless when you woke up? I thought maybe Endeavor burned it off. Clad in his own strength rather than the rags humans were forced to wear, he appeared divine. He raised Mina to her feet and said, let's go. He went to the wall and burst it open, saying, I don't know about you, but I miss fresh air. He's very manly. Kirishima pondered. He's really attractive. Mina pondered. I'm beginning to understand Mina's attraction to him, Toru pondered. Now when the Green Devil emerged from the almost intact structure, he saw 3 heroes, Tsukachi, and an ambulance. Hawks and Mirko were in fighting form, but Endeavor was far from it. The middle schoolers stopped when they seen him do so. The heroes stared back at Izuku as he looked down at them. Well, in Enji's case, glared. Mirko grinned broadly as she cracked her knuckles. The expressions on Hawks and Tsukachi's faces begged him to stop. He didn't. He stopped her with his outstretched hands as the rabbit hero jumped directly at him. You could fight me, and most likely win. But there are still injured people here. Do you want them to suffer more just because of how bad you want to take me down? Mirko's grin fell. 3 children were hurt when she turned to check behind the boy. Looking at her, Izuku narrowed his eyes and said, so what then? You're gonna kill the kids? Izuku started to hang in midair as flames grew from his feet. No, you will if you choose to fight me. They weren't particularly attractive, but that could change quickly. He saw Mirko flash her teeth and said, you're heroes, aren't you? Helping those in need should be your first priority. With that, he made the decision to depart. When Hawks watched the Green Devil's back sprout green fire wings, his eyes opened. The wing hero felt strangely proud as he took off at great speed. Tsukachi grumbled, I guess that's another lawsuit for copyright. Hawks interrupted, I didn't say I'm gonna sue. I would, but I'm too flattered. Kirishima and his classmates were with Mirko in the meantime. Snapping her fingers, Mirko said, damn, the one that got away. Mina held her sling and whispered, tell me about it. Yes, he did leave me with the children. Alas, it's time to act honorably. Dump them on someone else. Mirko gestured over her shoulder and said, all right, go to the medics and tell the detective what happened. To Hawks and the man in the coat and suit, they followed her thumb. Hawks pointed to Mina, who had a fractured left arm, and said, you guys don't look too bad, except her. She pouted, hey. Tsukachi inquired, is anyone else alive in there? Kirishima responded, yeah, but they're all unconscious. However, this prompted a fresh query. To the great surprise of Hawks and Tsukachi, Toru and Mina nodded next to him and said, the Green Devil patched us up. Believe it or not, he's a pretty manly guy. All 3 of them spoke largely favorably of the vigilante. How he generously used his own first aid kit to heal their wounds. Mina would never wash his sweatshirt, so he even took it off for her. His advice to Kirishima to be a great hero was the most admirable. Needless to say, Tsukachi and Hawks were stunned. Hawks thought, he told him he could be a hero. He must have spent his entire life hoping to hear such words. He's still a decent kid in spite of everything. We'll assist him. In the meantime, Izuku had tiny tears in his eyes as he flew through the air. He thought, I never apologized to them. After landing on a building, he rested. His bare flesh was soothed by the cold autumn breeze. He grinned as he turned to face the region he had destroyed. It was nice seeing you again, Ashido. You've got good friends, I can tell. In other places the biggest smile he could find was on the face of a dark figure. His voice echoed across an empty alley as he chuckled, ha ha ha. Poor Enji. I didn't realize you could miss your dear son so much, as he laughed. A poster for Endeavor caught his eye, and he touched it. Once he said, don't worry, you'll see me again. Until then, don't go dying on me. He set the poster on fire. Additionally, somewhere a black throne in front of a monitor held a man in a suit. An additional nail in the coffin. Excellent work, Izuku. Perfect, in my opinion. However, you lost some points for the kids you assisted. However, that is a trivial matter. I've created the test you'll be taking next. It's your cue, Tamura. I'm sure you'll find it excellent. A young, blue-haired man with severed hands all over him stood behind the man. As he exited the room, the young man laughed and said, "At last. I've been eager to try out my new toy. It was made to kill All Might, so let's see if the Green Devil can warm him up. Hee hee ha ha ha. According to the Shadow Lord, I wouldn't be so sure, my boy. Izuku has proven time and again that even the most super of superhumans are still humans. Mortal, destructible humans." A few days later, now that she was fully recovered, Endeavor was prepared to leave the hospital. Despite having practically let the devil go herself, Mirko had made fun of him, leaving a tick mark on his forehead. He had time to reflect. This boy has the natural talent and fire control to use other people's moves, knows his name, and can execute his flash fire techniques. His eyes are keen. He has been observing. Burn in hell, Enji Todoroki. The flame hero halted and said, "Endeavor." The top hero, All Might, summoned him in all his muscular prowess. Teleki was at his side. "Listen, about Toya. I know you feel awful. I get it, my son is missing too. I'm doing everything I can for him, just like you. We'll find them, Toya and Izuku." Endeavor never turned to face the power couple again. Before leaving, he stated, "I don't need your pity. Worry about your own family and I'll worry about mine." Then his pocket vibrated with his phone. "Fuyumi. How are you doing, Dad? We're really worried after seeing the news. We're worried, but Natsu and Shoto aren't quite." Endeavor gazed at his daughter's message. He typed back after giving it some thought. "Dad. I just got released with only minor scratches, so I'm all right. I'll have dinner at home." Fuyumi must have had a look of amazement, which Enji could only imagine. He raised his gaze to the sky, where sunshine was penetrating the clouds. "Toya, if you're still here, I can assure you that your new home will be better than the one you left behind." That night we cut to Izumi and Katsuki, our favorite kids, who are currently moping over their frustration and lack of power. Izumi listed, Death Arms, Mount Lady, Kamui Woods. Katsuki wrote, Best Genist, Hawks, Ingenium, Endeavor. Even my mom and dad. Fear was taking over the two of them. Despite having encountered some of the greatest heroes in Japan, if not the entire globe, the Green Devil continued to exist without showing any signs of weakness. Izumi was very upset. Her mother, who was practically helpless against the Emerald Demon, shared her peculiarity. In all likelihood, she would be slain if she ever saw him again. Unbeknownst to her, All Might once again provided what he believed to be the ideal remedy. Actually, it would be the worst thing he could do. Izumi is getting one for all. Wintertime. Izuku always detested winter and summer when he was with the Yagi family. He was either roasted or frozen in the inadequately insulated attic where he slept. He occasionally questions how he managed to survive in that home. Now, though, he had only one thought as the snow landed on his artificially white hair. I miss Rei. Prison in Kimusho. Izuku landed on a platform that was only a short distance from the jail bridge. Someone was yelling for heroes or the police on the street the other day, but they never arrived. They were too preoccupied on one boy to assist the general public. At Kimusho prison, a young man was shouting about a possible inmate break. The uneasiness was obvious even if no one was staring at him. He would have been written off as insane or performing a practical joke back then. But now that the heroes have failed time and time again, it's impossible to predict what might happen next. Izuku was about to leave after 2 hours of no action outside when he heard some rumbling coming from inside. The sound was a pounding that approached. Dust clouds started to rise as the ground started to tremor. He was ready to battle in front of the main door. He stood with his forest green fire burning in his hands, feet, chest, and face. Crash. Someone with superhuman power must have smashed the big doors to pieces. He heard the terrifying cackles of crooks and villains who had been set free. Izuku measured at least 50 escapees, as far as he could determine. Holy crap, we're free. I can't wait to rip some hero throats. It's finally our time in the sun, right boss? A figure of authority. In the smoke, Izuku spotted other individuals. One was a massive, beaked, muscular humanoid. One had blazing eyes and was a cloud of mist. His eyes widened in astonishment at the first person he saw. That's right. With these numbers under my guidance, we'll even end All Might. That voice said. That raspy, crackly, high-pitched voice. A young man with shaggy blue hair and multiple unattached hands covering him emerged from the dust veil. You? He cried out. The self-styled evil leader gazed forward, a broad, victorious smile spreading across his parched lips. He laughed and said, Oh good, you got my invitation. The other inmates were perplexed and a little irritated, but the Green Devil and the criminal leader appeared to know one another. The living mist said, "Who's the brat? Beats me, we gonna kill him?" "Allow me to fill in some of the blanks," he said. "This is no ordinary child, he is the Green Devil. Surely, word of mouth has reached you about the young scourge of Hero Society. He wields firepower that invokes fear and surpasses endeavors. He even fought All Might and lives free to tell the tale." The inmates were suddenly in awe of the small figure in front of them and even a little afraid of it. Although they had heard the guards talk about him, they were surprised at how shrill he was. Izuku saw that while the most of them shrank back, the Handyman, Mistman, and Birdman showed no signs of fear. The real danger came from those three. The group leader remarked, "And that's why we're here. Welcome to the group, friend." He sounded far too self-satisfied, as though he could explain everything. "You're like us, beaten down and oppressed by this hero-saturated society. So, join us, we'll tear down the last pillar holding this twisted world up, and create a brand new world fit for everyone. Not even All Might could stop us, the League of Villains. What do you say?" he said. "With one exception, though." To everyone's surprise, Izuku answered, "I refuse. A sizable contingent of supporters who are eager to hire me. He is a pawn of All for One. I'll stay away from him till I know more about him." The leader then began to scratch his neck and said, "Sorry, but I'm not interested in following an overcompensated blind leader who doesn't believe in what he preaches." Then the Mistman got in. "What did you say, brat?" As he added, "Young man, you do know what you're saying, don't you? If you're not with us, you're against us." The escapees started preparing their attacks with their oddities. He concluded menacingly, "It would be an unwise decision for you to make." Izuku's back gained wings, and an X was created by flames above his chest. The leader of the evil sneered, "We'll see about that. TCH. How disappointing. Get him." An army of 50 criminals charged toward the youngster, 1 against 50. Not fair. When Izuku lifted his arm, a massive hand of fire materialized. He seized a number of prisoners as he swiped across. Half of the scumbag army was easily destroyed as he swung down on the next wave while holding them firmly in his larger fist. "Street trash is the best you could find, villain leader," Izuku quipped. The leader didn't appear to mind. A man with razor claws attempted to swipe at his throat, saying, "Die." Izuku sidestepped and gave him a knockout uppercut. The subsequent wave employed long-range maneuvers. Dark energy bombs, fire, and lightning were all hurled at him, causing a great deal of catastrophic destruction. The youngster was unharmed, and all that was visible once the smoke cleared was a spinning green fire column. He said, "Is that all?" The inmates were taken aback by what they had just witnessed. They all appeared to be worthless weaklings because of one youngster. "Damn it, damn it, damn it," the leader snarled, frantically scratching to his neck. He was looking down at the slaughter of the newly established League of Villains when he and the living mist transferred themselves to the summit of a nearby watchtower. The mist guy said, "At this rate, he'll wipe us out before we've had a chance to do anything. Remember, Tamura Shigaraki, our mission is recruiting, which we have accomplished. All for One permitted you to try to welcome the Green Devil, but he is clearly more harm than good. We must allow some of our new friends a chance to escape and continue to ravage this crumbling world. It's time to unleash the Nomu." Tamura's neck scratching ended. Just as he was finishing his sentence, Izuku had just engulfed a man in icy flames and thrown his unconscious body aside. "It's a shame, really, Kurogiri. I never thought I'd be killing children on my big start, but it's only level 1. We have to start somewhere." He flew directly at the ringleader after spotting him when he looked up. "Nomu." Izuku drew his fist back and delivered a powerful blow. Was that supposed to hurt? Izuku's eyes widened as he saw that the dark, brain-exposed thing didn't even recoil from the harm when his fist struck it. He pulled himself back and remained in the air as the thing reached for him. Tamura's broad smile returned. "You may have fought All Might, but you barely scraped by. Let's see how you fare against the genetically enhanced Nomu that was designed to kill him. Try to make it fun, huh?" The beast suddenly sprang at Izuku and seized his ankle. He was flung straight to the ground. "It's a zombie thing from the news, but it's much more powerful, enhanced genetically. Indeed, it appears to be a mutant." Izuku spotted the Nomu approaching him from above as he hit the ground. Flashfire fist. Jet burn. Izuku gave Nomu a big green explosion in the middle of his body with his fist. The beast's entire body was devoured by the scorching explosion, but he remained still. But the Nomu seized the outstretched arm and crushed it, moving too quickly for Izuku to outmaneuver. Izuku shouted, "Ah!" as his limb spewed blood and his bones broke. As the dust settled, He noticed that his attack's damage was being quickly restored. Impressed. Nomu here has shock absorption and regeneration. I told you he was made to kill All Might, didn't I? And as a little bonus, he's got naturally super strength and thick skin. Good luck burning through that. So, are you gonna join or are we gonna drag you out of here by force? Tamura wept. Strong flames burst from where Izuku's arm was held. Neither, he shouted, pulling Nomu's arm back and melting away his flesh. The creature attempted to smash the demon into a red mark on the earth with his free hand. He moved to the back of the creature and avoided. He covered his left arm with a flaming blade, his green eyes focused on the creature's bare brain. He pierced the monster's brain with his palm. When the flames attempted to kill him, Nomu let out a loud, heart-stopping cry of agony. Kurogiri and Tamura gazed in horror and wonder at what transpired next. Nomu's regeneration was trying desperately to fix its brain, but it couldn't since the fiery sword was stuck in it. Izuku cried, "Say your goodbyes." The Nomu thrashed and trembled in an attempt to free himself from the green devil, but to no avail. If he has any sense at all, he will use all of his regenerating talents to restore his brain, which is the most sensitive and important part of him. The remainder of him will have to be burned. Nomu's head was enveloped in blazing green flames, and all he could do was scream and flail. They flew out of his mouth and tore into his guts. Small flames blazed in various places on his body before an emerald blaze completely engulfed him. His final roar sounded, and then there was a huge thump, and then there was still stillness. Izuku withdrew his arm from the bloody ash that was the brain of a Nomu. Once more, he was standing on top of a half-cremated, dead body. Tired from producing so much heat to dissolve the monster's monstrous organs, Izuku sighed. "You cheated." Izuku rolled over, barely evading a furious palm that was about to reach his throat. Tamura screamed, "You fucking cheated," and swung at Izuku one again. He sprang above the yelling man-child having a fit, saying, "Oh right, you're still here." Abruptly, a palm crept out of a vortex that materialized directly in front of his face. A portal? Isn't that man a living portal? Izuku pondered in surprise. He veered to the left, but before he could escape, his right forearm was grabbed, drawing him into the whirling warp gate. "Forget the Nomu," exclaimed Tamura. "I'm going to tear you apart myself," Izuku said as he felt his skin and the cloth on his arms separate. More blood spurted from his fractured right arm, and cracks started to appear over his forearm. Izuku screamed, "Damn you," as fire and blood spurted from his wounds, forcing Tamura to release his grip and roll in order to extinguish the flames burning his hand. Izuku looked about at his own injuries. The surface of his arm was cracked, as if it may shatter apart with the next blow. "This is all your fault." Tamura capitalized on his brief pause and launched another attack. He ran his hand over the boy's chest, revealing it, causing cracks to appear and more blood to spill out. "I hate you." Prominence burn. Izuku halted Tamura and cauterized his fresh wounds by launching a stream of scorching flames from his chest. He collapsed to his knees, gasping for oxygen after pushing himself that far. He was paying the consequences for using more electricity than he had meant. Too little, too late. The shrill, scratchy voice made Izuku's blood run cold. When he looked up, he saw Kurogiri shielding the villain with the covered hands. He carefully brought his palm to Izuku's face and stated, "It's time to send you back to hell." "Whoa, whoa, whoa," Tamura screamed, "Arg, fuck." When he hit the floor, bullets penetrated his leg and shoulder, and the air was filled with the sound of gunshots. Kurogiri shielded him from the prison guard's attack. He had to back off, as did his leader. "Damn it!" spit out one guard where he was standing. Izuku was at last able to relax enough to faint. Both the heat around him and the excitement wore off. The guards kept their weapons pointed on him as they cautiously made their way to his unconscious body. After battling a monster and a few of the escapees, he passed out. That kind of power was unique to one child. One of them exclaimed, "Holy shit, it's the Green Devil." A guard dropped his firearm and examined the boy, asking, "Did he stop these criminals? How strong can one kid be? Do we arrest him? Get these criminals back in their cells? I'll find a prison doctor. Once he's conscious, we'll interrogate him. Go." In other places Tamura fell to the ground, screaming, "Fuck. Fuck this. Fuck me. Fuck them. Fuck everything," as the anguish of his wounds overwhelmed him. Kurogiri hurried to grab him some disinfectant and bandages. The master got up from his chair and touched Tamura's blue hair, saying, "The Nomu was a complete bust, master. If it can't even beat a brat, there's no way in hell it can kill All Might." In his own words, "I wouldn't be so sure about that," he smiled. The young villain could feel his wounds being gradually and painlessly close. For now, you can relish in your success, Tamura. Though you may have lost your strongest pawn and the majority of your new army, handfuls of them did escape. And the prison break will send society even further into fear and panic. Things may not have gone exactly as we wanted, but take pride in the progress you've made. Tamura breathed a sigh of relief and got back on All for One, grinned and said, even so, I'll make him pay for this setback and these burns. Great. My copyright is progressing, and he has the ability to mobilize others to support him. Details, even if they were already rotting in cells with nothing else to do. Regarding the Green Devil, well, the last nail in Izuku Yagi's coffin is about to be placed. All Might, I'll let you handle that. After 2 months in the warden's office, Tsukachi exclaimed, you seriously have the Green Devil in your prison? The elderly man seated across the desk gave a nod. Indeed, he showed up and stopped the majority of our escaped prisoners. He was critically wounded by the end, and after what the boy did, it didn't sit right with us to leave him to die in the snow. But we are still being cautious. Our doctors have been working slowly, and we've kept him sedated until he is in stable condition. He's been fading in and out, but he should be fully conscious in 3 days. The detective said, I see, and you haven't classified him as a prisoner yet? The detective was very happy with that response. Not until we've heard his full story. He is far from innocent, but I'd like to see the full picture before making a decision, which is why I called you. Everyone had been telling him lately that the monster should be put in jail or possibly killed. Thank you for informing me. I'll be back, but please keep me informed of his condition. The warden extended a hand. Wait, before you go, he said, reaching into one of his desk's drawers for something. Tsukachi was given a folded piece of paper that appeared to have been written by someone who was half asleep. I said he's been fading in and out of consciousness. For the brief moments he was awake, he wrote this. A villain with several hands. A living portal. That monster was called Nomu. Made to kill All Might. Multiple quirks. All for One is plotting. Tsukachi was shivering after reading the paper. He suspected that the Demon Lord was still alive and well. He will undoubtedly reintroduce himself as the world's fear if this society continues to decline. The fact that Izuku was aware of All for One's existence and appeared to be aware of his potential is even more concerning. Tsukachi, meantime, questions whether All Might even informed his successor of the serious assignment given to her. When the detective finally inquired, when did he write this? Last night. Though his body has been suspended, and his quirk sealed, his mind has spikes at times. Bad dreams, the doctors suspect. Tsukachi placed the folded paper in the pocket of his blazer. Izuku always aspired to be like All Might and be a hero. He might even attempt to pursue All for One himself. That would be suicide, I must inform him. The warden gave the investigator a crazy look and added, I know you said the kid is sedated, but if possible, I'd like to speak to him face to face. Then Tsukachi interrupted, Sir, why on earth would? And Hawks and I can finally get him in one place long enough to talk to him. I'm working with several heroes, All Might included, to track down an extremely dangerous villain, the one who orchestrated the attack on your prison. The warden gave his request some thought. After what the youngster had done, it wasn't quite sane, but it wasn't entirely out of the question either. He was about to respond, but he was interrupted by the sound of an emergency alarm. He exclaimed, what the? He found him on the ground with a green-haired boy dressed in hospital clothes when he opened the door to ask the guard what had happened. He had tears in his eyes and was running frantically. That's him. Stop, shouted the warden. Just before Izuku got away, the mindscape of Izuku. Izuku was alone in a pitch-black emptiness. It was a dark night with no beginning or end. As he attempted to examine his knowledge and fresh information, he had a hollow expression in his eyes and primarily black and green hair. Izuku's hair became white when he thought about Rei, but returned to its natural color when he focused again. 10 years ago, back when Izumi and I were close, back when we were siblings, we lost our dad. Months later, Mom met Toshinori, All Might outside Dad's hospital. 10 years ago, I think All Might fought someone. A lot of the details about the villain are kept tightly hidden, but I'm betting it's All for One. Izuku's right hand was gripped until it bled. Damn bastard. And now that Yagi and Bakugo are training under Teleki and All Might, that places a target on their backs. TCH. Good riddance. All for One. He has to be as wounded as All Might. I can exploit that the same way I did with him. Don't. You can't. Izuku froze when he heard a voice he didn't recognize. He noticed a light behind him when he turned around. He saw a face that had been etched in his mind from years of gazing at its portrait as the light faded. The era's hero prior to the rise of All Might. It was Nana Shimura, his grandma. Izuku backed up a little and was stunned into silence. His expression changed to one of wonder and, "You can't face him. You'd be killed for nothing. I don't want that for you." Izuku's heart was thumping so hard that he was unable to hear her completely. Izuku was having a panic attack, and the mindscape started to tremble and break. He heard and saw the terrible things All Might had done, rather than hearing the voice of someone he admired more than All Might. He thought the person in front of him would reject him as well because of the mayhem he had caused and the lives he had taken. Just this time, and with good reason. The voice in her son's thoughts prevented Nana from gently approaching him. Azumi's voice was heard. "Old Dad and Grandma would be hella pissed to be stuck with you." She's right. The truth. Izuku, clad in cold sweat, leapt from his hospital bed. Whimpers escaped his throat, and his heart continued to beat wildly. As he clawed at the hospital clothing, he was aware of only one thing. "I must leave this place." He noticed that his left wrist had a quirk suppressant cuff fastened on it. He snatched up the pen and ran to the door. Desperately attempting to peel free the cuff with the pen, the unfortunate boy ran down the prison's hallways. The sound of the sirens did not alleviate his panic attack. "Hey, stop!" shouted one of the guards. Small green flames trailed behind Izuku as he lunged for the man, his survival instincts taking over. He knocked the man unconscious by chopping him on the neck. He ignored the warden's and detectives' yells and kept fleeing. That leads us to the present. Izuku is in a panic, crying, and frantically running for his life. He had nearly broken the cuff's seal as he ran toward the window at the end of the hall. "Stop!" Sukachi pleaded with him, but to no avail. Attempting to argue with a mouse as a lion was like that. His instincts were screaming for the former to flee. Sukachi scooped up the fallen guard's gun in a desperate move. He fired. A bullet struck the wall in front of Izuku, passing just over his head. Even though it was a warning shot, he didn't even slow down. Sukachi fired once more. It chopped off a couple of hairs this time. "Don't force me to do this, please." As tears clouded his vision, Sukachi pleaded inside. He prepared to pull the trigger a third time with his finger. Click. Boom. The shockwave of a massive explosion blew Sukachi and the warden away. As they attempted to gather themselves, they noticed a green flame soaring across the sky. He had made his getaway and was headed to an unknown location. Sukachi attempted to wipe his tears and dropped the rifle. The Green Devil freaking out against villains and monsters was something he had never seen or heard of before. The detective could not decide what to do. He was crying. The detective's mind kept repeating that thought. Izuku, meantime, was crying uncontrollably and doing his hardest to fly away as quickly as he could while in the air. He had jet flames on his boots, a huge set of wings on his back, and huge explosions that kept popping out of his palms. Green explosions. Propulsion through explosive speed. For balance, use soul jets. Reduce the resistance to wind with faux fierce wings. That's right. Fly right into the waiting, loving arms of your family after your nightmare. I'm sure they'll gladly comfort you. You are their child, after all. Hee. After a week, Izuku let himself some much-needed time to gather his thoughts. He was deeply shaken by his dream concerning his grandmother. He examined his physique. He still wasn't fully able to fight, and his right arm and chest had new crack-like scars. He no longer believed in himself. Desperate people do desperate things, and he was desperate. It was midday on a chilly day, and he just strolled along the dreadfully familiar suburban streets with his trusty yellow rucksack. He was walking when he failed to notice another scarred onlooker's regretful turquoise eyes. "See you in hell, kid." Izuku went via Dagoba Beach, where he used to hide from his tormentors. Garbage among garbage was always appropriate to them. However, there was no more rubbish on the beach. Even in the gloomy setting, it appeared immaculate and lovely. For the first time, he made the decision to walk on the spotless sand. He took the decision to remove his red sneakers and use his feet to feel the sand, but he was frozen by a few familiar faces. Izuku hid among the stones. "I should have guessed, of course. I can't continue like this, even though this may be the most agonizing day of my life." He was about to give up and join the Yagi family. He couldn't do this alone any longer, as horrible as it was for him to acknowledge. He was dependent on his family. All Might and Teleki were standing on the sandy shore, gazing proudly at their top pupils. Izumi Yagi and Katsuki Bakugo. The latter swallowed something thickly, her face twisted in disgust. Katsuki sighed. "Man, did I dodge a bullet?" I'm surprised you actually said Izumi could take it, Katsuki. Inko replied. Unlike me, she's practically defenseless against that green pyromaniac. She needs this to level the playing field. Inko and Toshinori grinned proudly at the boy's selfless gesture of kindness. What are they discussing? Why does Yagi appear to be on the verge of vomiting? Izuku pondered. Make no mistake, I'm still gonna be the #1 hero. We may be a duo, but there can only be one indisputable best, and it'll be me. Good luck swallowing that, Izumi. That enormous ego. Izumi smiled at her blonde buddy, ignoring her distaste. I wouldn't be so sure, Kachan. Before we know it, I'll be as strong as All Might. Like that means anything to the guy who'll surpass him. After approaching the two, All Might put his hands on their shoulders. We couldn't be prouder of you too, and all the extra hard work you put in these past few months. You really went plus ultra. Izumi may have inherited it, but Katsuki, you would also make an exemplary successor. I'm so happy to know the legacy of One for All is in good hands. Izuku's heart ached in his chest as All Might and Teleki continued with pride. The same scene recurs when he returns home after all this time. While his suffering goes unnoticed, Izumi and Katsuki receive acclaim. However, one small detail maintained his attention on the group. One for all. What is that? All for one's opposite. And by inherit, what does he mean? Katsuki inquired. Hey, how long until tech support gets here? Dejectedly, Inko remarked. Her dad says not until Japan's crime rate goes down. With a fist to his palm, Katsuki declared. So not long then. Izumi grinned beside him. Yeah. Once I get this power down pat, in like a week or two, we'll take the villains by storm, starting with the Green Devil. So normal. They believe that all they need to be heroes is their might. They lack everything else that would make them heroic. They rejected me because of this. All Might raised his voice. His smile faltered a little as he said, it will be nice to have Melissa. The house has been feeling rather empty. Smoke escaped from Izuku's medical clothes, which he clutched. Melissa, who is she? Having never met anyone with that name, he pondered. All Might continued to smile, but his expression darkened. The green-haired girl nodded and happily accepted, oblivious to what she was getting into. Izumi Yagi, you have inherited my quirk, One for All. Take honor in knowing that the world will one day look to you as its next symbol of peace. I know that you will succeed, for Japan and for your brother's and grandmother's honor. Izuku, meanwhile, was experiencing another breakdown. What the devil is happening here? Is it One for All? He inherited his peculiarity? This is all nonsensical. And in my honor. How does that mean? Before his thinking slowed to a terrifying conclusion, it was racing. Since his disappearance last year, there has been an increase in crime and villainy. In a disintegrating superhuman society, the Yagi's eccentric son is alone himself. What might occur? Izuku soared away from the beach, trying desperately not to think about it. Fortunately, as usual, Bakugo and the Yagi were too preoccupied with one another to notice him. Izuku flew to the front door of the Yagi family, which was half a mile from the ocean, and crashed through it. He left the doorframe burning as he got up, barely feeling any pain. The ancient memorial table caught his eye. That was no longer the case. With flowers and photos of the current family, it appeared to be just another decorative table. Aside from one. As Izuku hurried up the stairs, his fire burning away at the home without his concern, he let his tears fall freely. He proceeded directly to Izumi's chamber. He demanded answers, regardless of whether she would be killed for it. Bunk beds were something he witnessed that broke his heart. Prior to being incorrectly identified as quirkless, he had not observed those. He noticed that a photograph of a blonde girl with blue eyes was open on her laptop on the bottom bunk. She appeared to be from a foreign nation, and he had never seen her face before. Who is that? He said out loud in surprise. Maybe Izumi's journal might help clarify the situation. After deleting the blonde girl's photo, he navigated to a random page in his sister's digital journal. Even when he's gone, Izuku keeps pissing me off. I found his journal about Dad. It's full of stuff about him and the old man together. There's barely any me. One last slap in my face before you leave, Deku. Just rub it in my face that you've got so many good memories of Hisashi, while I have almost none. Izuku was repulsed and disgusted by his identical sister on a whole other level. After all these years, he finally realized why she detested him. It's because he spent more time with Hisashi than she did. Actually, more than anybody. Izumi couldn't find time for her unremarkable father and his feeble fire-breathing ability because she was too enamored with their busy, heroic mother. She takes it out on him because she feels bad and regrets not being like Izuku. Even though Izuku did nothing wrong at the time, that is what she sees him Asa her deepest regrets manifested. Izuku clicked to view an entry about this. Melissa, on another page of her diary. She's gonna be great to have around, making awesome gear for me and Kachan. At least this Quirkless is smart enough to know she can't be a hero and makes herself useful, unlike Deku. Izuku's heart began to burn, bleed, and weep. Q. Quirkless. He said in a weak voice. He was like this blonde chick. He owns her. Substitute. Izuku vomited all over the laptop while clutching his stomach. He fell to his hands and knees after rolling off the bed. Coughing up the contents of his stomach, he sobbed. His sister's hatred of him and his family's efforts to move on were now clear to him. He had never been hit so hard in his life. That was his thought, however. Without observing his vomit dissolve through the floor, Izuku got up and walked out of the room. Yes, he throws up lava. Later questions. Pushing himself, he peered inside his parents' chamber. Other than the fact that Nana's photo was now concealed within the drawer, nothing had changed since his last visit. Picking it up, he put it to his chest and sobbed. His emotions were spilling out of him as the flames were climbing the home. Izuku thought, Quirkless, and Toshinori suddenly appeared in his mind. Toshinori said that Izumi somehow inherited his peculiarity. Did it start with him or? Izuku asked, glancing at his grandmother's burning photo. No. He was trained by you. You have to have. So he was also Quirkless? Was he like me? However, he never took any action to assist me. Izuku noticed something written on the back of the paper when he turned it over. From Toshinori, of course. To the master, Izumi will make us both proud as its ninth wielder, so I've decided to pass on our quirk to her. Maybe you two will be together, and you can help him. I'm sorry for my son, Izuku. But I can't leave the power in his hands. He may be like me, but he isn't me. He lacks the courage to be a hero. It will be much better for him to stay shy and quirkless. Mother, please keep an eye on us from above. The paper in Izuku's hands turned to ash, and his flames grew. Today, his hatred for his family was reaching new heights. He recently discovered that his father is the greatest hypocrite in history. To him, telling him that he couldn't become a hero was equivalent to telling him that his son had no place in this world or in this family. That day, Izuku's entire world fell apart. His bond with his father would make perfect sense if the Quirkless of that era had been treated the way he was. A memory of his difficult existence was too terrible for the coward to look upon. He made a fantastic monster because he wanted to put it behind him and concentrate on being the greatest symbol in the world. There is only one location left to search, his former chamber. Izuku burned through the rusted flooring that separated him from his initial prison cell without bothering to use a ladder. When he looked back at his mattress, he noticed something completely different. He would always be able to see it. He was brought to his knees by the sight since it was so startling, surprising, unbelievable, and heartbreaking. His face remained almost expressionless in shock as he sobbed in silence. He would have puked once more, but he was unable to do it. Inside, he was empty. He was looking at a shrine dedicated to the dead, and in the middle was his photo. Izuku Yagi has passed away. As he absorbed this devastating truth, the broken soul was on his hands and knees. His relatives thought he had passed away. They went on after accepting that he had left them. He was merely an unsightly recollection that they hoped would soon go, the live representation of their regrets, shortcomings, and terrible history. The unfortunate creature found himself drowning in a sea of burning fire and utter anguish. The blazing hot fire of his suffering had almost consumed the entire house. To them, I'm dead. I've already been forgotten. The oddball failure with no purpose in life. No. Here, I did play a part. I represented everything they wanted dead in a living form. I was destined to be their villain, but I wanted to be a hero. And there are no happy endings for villains. He sat grieving over his own death for a long time without realizing it. After getting up, Izuku went to the attic and made his way to the shrine. He took off his crimson sneakers and set them on fire. He extracted an extremely rare All Might trading card from the smallest pocket of his rucksack. He set it before its possessor. The youngster, weeping silently, clasped his hands together in supplication. He watched as the shrine burned and the attic collapsed under the fire. The searing tears continued to trickle forth as he closed his eyes. You didn't deserve to live your life in that manner. It was a nightmare for you. You can finally be free of it now, at least. I'll show your family what true hell is like, so don't worry. Consider it a parting present from the Green Devil. The house's roof gave way, causing the floor to drop into the ground floor. At the conclusion of his prayer, the Green Devil collapsed. He spotted them when he opened his eyes. Bakugo and the Yagi outside the entryway. They were the ones that made Izuku's life extremely difficult. His eyes, pin-sized pupils and bloodshot orbs, opened into a wild, explosive gaze. In a moment, his tears vanished. The building that had been their home for so long was destroyed as a huge pillar of green flames devoured the entire house. In the wake of the Green Devil, Izuku Yagi, Nana Shimura, and Hisashi Midoriya were all destroyed by fire. The devil lifted his hands in front of him and threw two enormous blasts at the hypocritical family from within the quickly disintegrating house. He wanted to soar away, and the recoil did just that. He had to leave them alone. There were huge wings on the back of the Green Devil, jet flames from the soles of his boots, and blasts from his hands. Because of his amazing speed, he effectively turned into a huge blazing missile that melted, burned, or otherwise destroyed everything in its path. As he crashed through house after house in his childhood neighborhood, his fire grew broader and bigger. Dozens of lives were lost every second, and he had no plans to stop anytime soon because the disaster's flames spread so swiftly and burnt so furiously. The extent of the devastation was unparalleled, and the person in charge was clenching his teeth as he relived the entire incident. He caught a glimpse of Aldera faces in one house. His fire grew to 3 times the size of the house. You'll pay. As he burned his abusers, he thought, straight ahead, he saw a playground he knew well. A decade ago Izumi said, "Come on, Izuku. Let's play heroes and villains," with excitement. The youngster was shaking uncontrollably. Kachan responded, "Oh okay, but why am I the villain every time?" He lit his quirk and frightened the green-haired boy, asking, "Isn't it obvious? Unlike you, we heroes don't lose." Now the devil roared, "RRGGHHHHHH," and it sent a chilling wail through Musutafu. His power was the size of a big building, and his flames just got greater. He left behind a mile-wide track of devastation that only widened, nothing but smoldering dirt and hundreds of immediately burned corpses. Everything in its path was consumed by the emerald fire, which seemed to have no end. At last, the Green Devil witnessed Aldera Junior High, the darkest of his hells. For the first time, he accelerated since he was eager to get to the school. Burn in hell, every last one of you. He now resembled a skyscraper-tall green sun gliding across the planet. In a single moment, hundreds of Alderas were wiped from the face of the planet. Abruptly, the demon was surrounded by tiny explosions. Even over the trail of flames he left behind for a little more damage, they increased in size. They kept expanding until, for a mile and a half, everything was destroyed by a huge, colossal explosion. The flames behind him heated up tremendously, then nearly went out when the green sun exploded. The Green Devil got himself out of a crater. Izuku no after resolving his discomfort, he felt better and could see the harm it had caused. There was only cinders and ash as far as I could see. He instantly devastated hundreds of innocent lives. Oddly enough, though, that truth hardly disturbed him. Over his head, lightning flashed and thunder roared, and then there was a sudden, intense rainstorm. He turned his back on the devastation and took off with his quirk without saying anything. What remains after the birth of the devil, who is now a resident of this world? A burnt cemetery. "Goddammit, kid," complained a short elderly man. He was standing in the center of his now demolished house. His talented and gifted granddaughter has been using one for all for about a month, and the reason it's in ruins is because she has no control over it at all. Recovery Girl had just finished treating the 9th successor, who lay on the floor with her arms in slings. Gran Torino complained, saying, "I'm genuinely convinced your memory is worse than mine." Izumi was furious after a week of her grandfather's rigorous training. Initially, she was promised that One for All would make her innate quirk even more powerful, but her telekinesis hasn't gotten any stronger. Secondly, One for All appears to be independent. Occasionally, the passed-on quirk emerges and sends off a hugely devastating shockwave when she tries to trigger her own. The recoil is so intense that it literally breaks bones. Furthermore, she is unable to turn it off or lower the power output no matter how hard she tries or concentrates. It's always running at full speed. She was about to say, "It's not my foul," when she got kicked in the face. Gran Torino's mental anguish was far worse than hers. That right there, that's your problem. Inability to take responsibility, not admitting you have your faults. Your many, many faults. I blame Toshinori. You haven't known real pain in your life since he came into the picture. He spoiled you, gave you One for All like it was giving you ice cream after a bad day. Huh. Why couldn't it have been the twin that had a brain? He grumbled. Izumi cried, "He would have been worse," Gran Torino moaned. "He couldn't even protect himself, let alone others. Besides, he's gone. He uttered the final sentence as though it were a curse. Yes, and you're still here. Izumi chose to spar with Kachan after she was completely recovered and had left her grandfather's house. Both of them ended up in the hospital. Katsuki said, "Fuck, I really did dodge a bullet." Izumi tightened her jaw. Thus, mastering this power won't be simple. Alright, I'll never give up until I'm the best. She can tell herself that's all she wants, but she's actually failing for the first time in her life. She's beginning to feel the effects. Their favorite American called the two of them, "Hey G you holy. What happened to you two? You look like you got hit by a train," Melissa shouted. As Katsuki put it, "I wish." Izumi muttered, "One for all is not easy." Melissa's head cocked. "Really? My dad said Uncle might got it right off the bat. So you keep going all out and break your bones. Maybe you should try visualizing, meditation. It's all in your mind as much as your body. Do you have anything in the back of your head that could be bothering you?" Despite her well-meaning intentions and sound advice, Melissa was only able to irritate Izumi and Katsuki. It reminded two extremely strong quirk wielders of a quirkless individual attempting to assist them. With a sigh, Katsuki said, "Huh? What do you know about using a quirk right when you don't have one of your own? Stay in your lane, tech support." Melissa recoiled slightly. She was treated with contempt rather than having her cousin stand up for her. "He's right, just finish our gauntlets and we'll be fine, thanks." Izumi ended the call. Melissa was hit in the heart back in the States, but she pushed it down. "It's all right. Consider it from their point of view. They're being trained by a hero like Uncle Might. Therefore it is likely that they will eventually catch up to him. In addition to the fact that the Green Devil destroyed the majority of their community, that is a lot of strain. They might have died. We're going to UA once the devil is defeated. Together, it will be fantastic," she told herself over and over. Every Japanese news outlet carried coverage of the enormous amount of damage. Above the still smoldering cemetery of hundreds, helicopters hovered. The melted remnants of a playground were observed by a family of frogs. Sue clung to her younger siblings. In addition to the destruction of their new playground, the oldest Asui remarked, "That's the area where Zu lives." The only brother, Samadare, inquired, "Is he okay?" Suyu glanced at the television before turning back to her brother and sister's anxious and eager gaze. She prayed inwardly for the lad who had discovered her siblings in that wilderness, saying, "He can take care of himself. I'm sure he's fine." She also recalled his eyes, which were his most remarkable characteristic. Bags were stored beneath those green orbs. The obvious animosity, rage, and deep sorrow within them. "Please, Zu, be all right. The magnitude of calamity is horrifying. Buildings ranging from companies to homes, all reduced to cinders by one child the heroes continue to fail at apprehending." Fuyumi shut off the television. Natsuo, munching a bowl of cereal, remarked, "News, always a downer." The woman with the spectacles had a dejected expression on her face. Her younger brother looked up from his bowl and said, "Natsu, I'm worried. That angsty homeless kid. Yeah, even if he can take care of himself, how can he handle himself in a fight with villains? He has a thermal vision quirk, so he'll be able to detect them better than most. And he looked decently strong for his age. But he's still a hurt kid," Fuyumi said. Endeavor entered the room and stated, "That's why we're here." The grandfather of Todoroki was dressed in his new hero armor, which featured gauntlets on his wrists and big plates on his shoulders. Cutting-edge compression technologies to enhance his flashfire methods. The flame hero then departed his house, saying, "To make sure you and everyone else can rest easy, I will personally cremate that little menace. Stay safe." Natsuo just sighed. He gets his ass kicked by another flaming demon, and thinks it's a good time to try to be our dad. "Natsu?" Fuyumi yelled. Technically, the young, white-haired man was correct. Ever since that other white-haired person showed up at Central Hospital, Endeavor had been engaged in combat. The thoughts that he had spent years trying to suppress came back to him. He started experiencing recurring nightmares. He is on Sokoto Peak in them, and he is not alone himself. His oldest son, whom he had thought was dead, is standing in front of him. He was consumed by fire. They're usually crimson flames, and he wakes up feeling hopeless. At other times, he wakes up frustrated because they're green. Rarely, they're depressed, and he experiences self-loathing, despair, remorse, and heartache. The youngest son of the household left the training room after the number 2 hero had departed. Natsuo said, "Hey Shoto, how'd training with our devil go?" Though not as horrible as usual, the boy with the red and white hair appeared roughed up. "It was more flexible, he wasn't so hyper-focused on forcing out my fire. I don't care to know what's going on in that bastard's head," but it seems he's starting to get some sense knocked into him. A disaster that seemed to go on forever. From the news helicopters, it appeared to be that way. Others saw it as proof that the Green Devil was the adversary rather than a friend. It was a betrayal to 3 middle schoolers. They hoped, nevertheless, that he was not what his behavior suggested. The burned cemetery. They are now referring to it by that name. The vast expanse of tragedy and death that was once a quiet, vibrant community. 2 of the people most likely to perish at the hands of the Green Devil's merciless flames were at the start of this path of devastation. Inko and Toshinori Yagi are the real names of Teleki and All Might. They prayed together while kneeling on their home's ashes. To Hisashi and Nana for protection, since they were the ones who helped them achieve their dreams or kept their family together. For people who had been wrongfully killed by a monster. And for him, Izuku, their son. Inside, the 2 heroes thrashed themselves. This occurs right after they had cause to smile in Bakugo and Izumi. It served as a wake-up call for them. Happy days are impossible as long as the Green Devil is still there. They had no notion, but that's what they believed. They promised to stop the Green Devil and hold him accountable for his actions. Additionally, if it means killing him. A man with black hair sitting at his desk thought to himself, this could be problematic. He had seen the news about the Kimusho prison inmates who had escaped. A few of the fugitives were fired for misconduct at work from the Yayorozu firm. The patriarch of Yayorozu now had cause to fear petty retribution from those he formerly trusted, since police and heroes were no longer as strong as they once were. His only daughter, who was unaware of it, was listening to his predicament and was aware of what he thought would be the worst-case situation. A butler informed her, "Lady Momo, your trainers are ready." With a determined expression on her face, Momo strode through the corridors of her family's estate and said, "Thank you, I'll go meet them immediately. We cannot always rely on others to assist us when we need it. Heroes are overburdened. We must be capable of defending ourselves. Zoo, isn't that correct?" Countless innocents going about their daily lives. In an instant, it was taken away. We have all had clashing opinions about the young vigilante on the streets of Musutafu. He has been a fickle person, committing both noble and horrible acts, but today it is clear as day who is behind the mask. An evil, ruthless, dangerous, heartless, remorseless monster, someone who truly lives up to his name. A devil. Now the streets are filled with unease and suspicion. Criminals are more active, and heroes are being overwhelmed. And until this devil is caught, tried, punished, whether it be life in a cell or death, the good people of Japan cannot look to the future with a smile. Tsukachi squeezed the bridge of his nose and shut off his office television. On the detective's couch, Hawks remarked, "Well, ain't that just lovely?" His golden eyes were glaring at the floor as he sat slumped over with his hands over his face. The wing hero started, "This doesn't make sense. First, the Green Devil fights an entire prison worth of criminals, along with a Nomu far above what we faced, to the point where he's comatose for 2 months. Then all of a sudden, he decides to take hundreds of lives." Hawks was aware that Izuku woke up in a panic, which prompted inquiries. However, he did not kill or seriously damage anyone, even during a panic attack. And a week after his own escape, the scorched graveyard happened. Hawks recognized that the youngster was forced to become the monster he is, but this mindless devastation, along with the fact that he was aware of All for One, was too much. Given everything they've witnessed, the young pro could want to join the Demon Lord, but he didn't want to think the worst. Tsukachi caught the bird's attention with the words, "Hawks." Tsukachi sat in his chair and said, "I think I can shed some light on what's going on in his head." The timing for this couldn't have been worse. Izuku was at his wit's end. All the bloodshed, the villains and heroes hunting him, he's just a kid. It's incredible he lasted this long without completely losing his sanity. I saw it in his eyes as he fled. He'd had enough. He went home, ready to turn himself into the people who broke him. And those very same people may have broken him beyond repair. Hawks paid close attention. What could they have possibly done now? Beat the crap out of him or something? Tsukachi grumbled. Hawks considered that for a while before his eyes widened. If it was just that, we might have a smaller list of casualties. No, they hit him in the wound that's been there for most of his life. His quirkless status. But that's clearly not the case anymore. He's got a hella powerful quirk. The words gathered in Tsukachi's throat, and he gritted his teeth. Hawks was already aware that All Might's nepotism was impairing his judgment when he told him, "All Might told me he had picked his successor, and that he would be raising her to be the next symbol of peace." Hawks's eyes widened as he became confused. He gave her his power, transferred one for all to Izumi Yagi. He told me the week before Izuku snapped. One for what? Transferred his quirk. How could he even? They don't even share blood. And one for all. That sounds like the opposite of all for one. The opposite of stealing authority. Hawks determined the most distinctive aspect of All Might's hidden power without much further explanation. Sukachi nodded and said, All Might can share his power with others. Hawks ran his hand through his hair and said, Yes, and he inherited it from his teacher. He doesn't have any quirk of his own. He was quirkless, too. Seriously. But wait, if he could do that, why didn't he just transfer the quirk to Izuku? It would save the kid a hell of a lot of pain. Sukachi tightened his jaw. Though Sukachi hated to say it, it was the truth about his friend. I know All Might better than most, how strong and courageous he is. But when faced with his past, he's a coward. He lived a life as hard as Izuku's, but instead of facing it and helping his quirkless stepson, he ran away from the pain of those old wounds. He told me Izuku didn't have the strength or courage, even though he could have trained him to be worthy. It's clear now how much conviction the boy has. Hawks's mind was racing with ideas and feelings, most of them bad. He was told the whole one for all and all for one story by Sukachi, along with what Izuku must have learned. That All Might provided one of Izuku's greatest abusers with the instrument that would have greatly benefited him. When it was finished, Hawk's distaste for the so-called Pillar of Justice grew. But Izuku must be experiencing far more than the poison in his veins. He ended hundreds of lives and destroyed countless futures because of it. Remember when I said I have nothing but respect for number one? I take it back. Hawks found it difficult to control himself for the first time. So you're telling me at this point, All Might just handed All for one the perfect tool to destroy this society. Forget the kid's quirk, he's got a library of knowledge on other quirks and potential weaknesses. Plus, if he wants to, he can go public and tell everybody everything, about All Might. Teleki. One for all. Sick every villain on the streets on them while destroying the public's faith in heroes. And if he joins All for one, it's over. The Demon Lord muttered to himself, this wasn't part of the plan. Everything was going smoothly. Young Izuku had now realized that his family had utterly abandoned him and were feckless hypocrites. The massacre that transpired later was the cherry on top. Reaching out to the youngster, encouraging him during his worst moments, and bringing him up to the brilliance he genuinely possesses was all that remained. Then he would have the ideal weapon to wipe out All Might and his legacy. But an illegal drug dealer who is well versed in the trade's secrets declared with pride, nothing like spring. The season of renewal. Today, I start by renewing my drug cartel. Let's what scumbag comes rolling in first. In a warehouse filled with the most illicit drugs in existence. Like the other dozens of criminal organizations, he was desperate to regain control and engulf the populace in the shadowy side of superhuman society. While he was bragging, a new customer entered. His squeaky voice called out, Hey Shortstack, you interested in anything? The short figure wore a hood that concealed their face in the dark, sleeves that were too big for their arms, and a ragged pitch black coat that reached their ankles. They were the epitome of a dubious-looking individual. Their black combat boots reverberated as they entered. The customer showed no expression and was not amused by the drug cartel's promotion. I got a whole boatload. Oh, that good. What you looking for? Hallucinogens? Aphrodisiac? Quirk booster? Or weed, like my pops uses? Whatever you want, we got. He said in a rough, but almost youthful, voice, I want information. The fact that he was speaking to a child made the drug cartel a little uncomfortable, but then he understood that if even children are purchasing his products, it's a sign that the hero world is collapsing. Sure, I got about 20 men out on the streets mackin' sales. Gotta give the pros another reason to quit. You're looking at our main stash. If ya don't got cash right now, you could sell some grams. Work your way up. Shut up. He was swiftly dismissed. The cartel leader shook his head and said, I want information on clients. Sorry little man, I don't give info about the guys that keep me afloat. You know how it is. If you ain't buyin' or workin', get lost. The diminutive individual did not depart. I understand now, you're a brat seeking trouble, the man said, placing his palm on the ground and extracting a piece that resembled a semicircle with spikes. The one in the cloak looked around. There were an absurd number of boxes scattered over the area. Drug-filled boxes. How much of your stuff is flammable? The cartel chief scoffing. Two green flashing orbs in the cloak made the cartel boss apprehensive. Damn near all of it. We only got the worst of the best and the best of the worst, he exclaimed. The cloaked one extended his hand, and green flames covered his palm, saying, Good to know. After realizing his error, the cartel attempted to stop him, but it was too late. They were trapped by the raging flames while the majority of the warehouse's interior was destroyed by fire. "You fucking brat. We also got gunpowder and dynamite in the back. You'll blow us to hell." Before he could completely pull away, the Green Devil caught him by the neck. The man placed his hands on the ground and attempted to form a barrier around himself. He violently hauled the man up and trampled on the stone that covered him, saying, "He can manipulate stone, but the most he can control is equivalent to his own body mass. And once he tampers with the stone, it loses its durability." The cartel leader was being strangled while gazing into the Green Devil's terrifying, blazing eyes. "I see, he's desperate." Heartlessly, he said, "Not us, just you." The individual was experiencing an uncontrollable heartbeat. His neck was being burned by a hard, scarred, calloused hand that was hanging him. When he heard a big thud in the back, his panic increased. There was another, much bigger blast. "If you want to live longer, tell me." The young man pulled his hoodie back with his free left hand. He had green eyes that, though burning, had the unfathomable chill of death in them, a scarred right face, and fluffy hair that was partly black and green. Before he died, his last words to the man were, "Tell me what you know about All for One." The heroes were notified that several warehouses had been destroyed. These were all either criminal stashes or hideouts. A month had passed since the scorched graveyard tragedy. Receiving assistance from this demon was really annoying, but it meant that there were less criminals on the streets because of the person who motivated them. They interpreted this as an indication that the devil was back at work, which indicated that there would be more anxiety and uncertainty. Izuku was standing on top of a structure that had been destroyed by the clashes between heroes and villains. These buildings were much easier to locate now than they were in the past. His fire was unaffected by the rain that fell on him. His cape, which was manufactured from premium materials that were resistant to all natural and man-made forces, fared well in the explosions. If the villain he took it from hadn't killed him, he would thank him. He denigrated Musutafu, the police sirens, the aura of terror, and the suffering and agony. And his only emotion was indifference. Since he had decided on his ultimate objective, none of this mattered to him. Shortly later, I put it together. Izuku Yagi passed away. One for all and all for one. Like their wielders, they are opposites. One is a common skill, it provides. Thus, the reverse is the stealing of power. I became more aware of what was out there the more I considered it. It appears that All for One is able to steal peculiarities and transfer them to his puppets, such as the Nomu. A villain who lived to tell the story despite permanently injuring Prime All Might. The Shadow Emperor, the Demon Lord, the King of Villains, the Merchant of Quirks, and the Symbol of Evil. My drive and paranoia are only fueled by the little knowledge I can find on him. Izuku sprang from the structure and soared across the night sky, illuminating it like a beacon that would guide anyone with important information to him. This man. This guy. Is this world's true Satan. Even though One for All is the only force capable of stopping him, Yagi controls it, and I will never give it to such a weakling and incompetent person. I'll take it one step at a time because I probably lack the strength to stop him myself. Every villain I encounter will be killed, his forces will be weakened, he will be forced into a corner, and he will be held accountable for all the lives he has destroyed. And so will I. Izuku's most recent addition to his collection of quirk analysis notebooks was found inside his rucksack. A self-analysis. Since leaving his previous existence and reawakening his power, he has used it as a journal to document all that has happened to him. The events that led him to turn into the Green Devil, the social scourge, as well as the conclusion of his tale. He will unleash his quirk to its most destructive potential once he gets to All for One, resulting in a devastating explosion that will burn everything for kilometers. He will definitely have more than a scratch, even if it doesn't kill him. But Izuku will not stop until he has destroyed himself. This journal is meant to be discovered by others so they can discover his tale. To expose the duplicity of All Might, Endeavor, Bakugo, and Yagi, to rob them of their ambitions, hopes, and perfect futures, and to make them live their lives as he did a hateful, loathed, and without anything to look forward to. However, it will be justified. His mark on this world will be that. The evidence of his existence. Death. Destruction. Disaster. Evil is taking over. Once a bustling neighborhood, it has now crumbled into a heap of debris. The heroes tasked with stopping criminals and villains were overburdened as they took more and more control of the streets every day. It was believed that there were too many heroes in this society, but this was not true. The heroes hung up their capes and resigned as the public vented their fear and blamed their defenders as the tranquility faded and was replaced by chaos. They were only famous people who performed for attention and admiration. There were too many idiots pursuing trivial goals in our society. That's why it fell apart so fast. Those that stayed risked their lives even though they had little to no fame or glory to acquire. They were this society's real heroes. It's unfortunate that they are now just half as numerous as they once were. Right now, there is no sun visible and Japan is shrouded in ominous clouds. There was just one light in the sky, and it was neither sides. A foe of both. The first fissures in this hero-centered society were made by the vigilante. Everyone who saw him was filled with fear as he swiftly soared through the air. The Green Devil was a person who wore a black, frayed cloak. He sat atop a deserted structure that offered a good perspective of the destroyed city. There was a huge skirmish in the distance, with more buildings falling and dust plumes rising. More rambling on the loose. As he sprang from the building, his viridescent flames trailing behind him, he thought. A huge red kaiju-like creature shouted with his green twin, "This is our turf, punk." Their bodies were muscular and their exteriors were scaly. "Not anymore, shitheads," screamed a behemoth with 4 arms. They fought off ground-bound heroes in a cataclysmic battle that rocked the whole region. Luckily, there were no civilians left. A lady dragon and her periwinkle student were closing in on the two. She informed her ward, "Citizens are evacuated, now's your chance, Najire-chan." The long-haired girl said, "Gotcha," and pointed her hands at the squabbling titans. In order to accomplish 2 goals at once, she targeted the kaiju brothers. As she launched her attack, golden strands of electricity curled around her wrists. 50% output. Najire wave. A powerful surge of energy erupted from her palms and struck the scaled pair squarely. The young heroine brought them to their knees even though she was only using half of her entire power. The giant with 4 arms discovered he had more companions. He grabbed a big piece of fallen concrete and pointed it toward the person using the energy quirk and dragon. "Damn heroes!" he exclaimed. But behind his back, the two of them saw something coming. It was approaching with lightning speed. "Take this." The heroes had already moved aside as 4 arms launched the massive projectile, their focus divided between him and the swiftly approaching stranger. When 4 arms turned to look behind him, he saw something that made him freeze in terror. The devil in green. Like deer in headlights, the kaiju brothers looked up, their heads lifted. Immediately, the devil's emerald green wings grew longer, and 2 more sprouted from his lower back. Without a trace of effort or sympathy, he soared straight over the giants, his wings slicing through their flesh. 4 lost his lower left arm after being cut in half. They decapitated the kaiju brothers. With thunderous thuds, their towering corpses hit the ground, leaving the streets covered in blood. Though in excruciating pain, the 4-armed one was still alive. He clung fiercely to life, crying, "Oh, my organs! Stay in there, stay in your home. Daddy needs you." The dragoon hero and her pupil, their faces displaying horror, gazed over the carnage. Cold-blooded, brutal efficiency. The Green Devil is merciless. He was soaring farther away with his typical-sized wings when they turned to look behind them. He glanced behind him. Izuku just had a fleeting glimpse of the blue-haired girl, but she seemed so young that he was certain she was a hero student. "You have to be joking. Are they so desperate that they are enlisting students to bolster their numbers?" I couldn't deny she had an amazing power and knew how to use it, he thought angrily. A collection of police cars cruising the streets caught Izuku's attention. He plunged in and turned off his quirk. Wearing military boots and a dark cloak, he strode through the downpour. He found a puddle and gazed into it for a while. The boy who peered back at him was white-haired, stone-faced, exhausted, and disfigured. His hair dye was wiped away by the rain that poured on his head. Izuku pulled the hood of his cloak over his head. In order to avoid thinking about his family and to remind himself of Rei, he kept his hair white. He strolled toward a shelter for the inhabitants of this demolished city. He only intended to sit outside of it and take a brief rest. He had no intention of attacking anyone. But there was a disturbing sound coming from the alley. In a tight blue bodysuit stated, "You know, as a hero, I think I deserve compensation for escorting you here." A small girl with ox cable earlobes and short purple hair was being devoured by his gaze. The hero merely laughed, but her ears pricked up defensively. The girl gritted her teeth angrily and said, "If I were you, sweetheart, I wouldn't do that. If you attack me, you'll be called a villain. How would your parents respond to that?" She was in a difficult situation. But just before the scoundrel touched her, he gasped and experienced an unbearable amount of pain. The girl with the purple hair flinched at what she saw. With a controlled fire sword covering the hand, the nearly rapist was viciously pierced from the back all the way to his stomach. The green devil threw the victim aside after he vomited blood. Kyoka gazed at her demonic savior in disbelief. His palm was coated with viscera and blood as he stood in front of her, but he didn't care. His peculiarity set his feet on fire, and his fire blocked his eyes and lower jaw. The dark alley was illuminated by the two big, blazing wings he carried on his back. His hair, which matched the color and appearance of his quirk, was standing on end and appeared to be blazing green. Kyoka froze in terror at the creature in front of her. She was practically paralyzed by what she had saw him perform in front of her. Before turning to the corpse, she could see emerald pupils piercing her soul through the flames. "Take a good look," he said, his voice solemn and solemn. Despite her reluctance, Kyoka listened to his comments, which resonated with her. This is the side of heroes you don't see on TV. The sounds of the approaching police cars made her ears perk up. Raising his hand, the green devil gestured toward her. Still unable to move or speak, Kyoka could only quiver more wildly. She saw pupils in the green devil, but they vanished behind a shroud of pure white. Before striking her with a powerful burst of green fire, he remarked, "Nothing is black and white in this society." She shrieked in terror as she was knocked to the ground. But she did not burn, and she did not feel dread or horror. It was a harmless, warm flame. She was still unable to pull her legs from the dirty alley, and they hung over her like a blanket. She recalled his statement that, "Nothing is black and white." She gazed at the ashes of the threat that rescued her and the body of the jerk who had almost attacked her. Without incident, the cops located her and transported her to the refuge. Her experience with the green devil would never be forgotten. The cops were shocked when she told them what had transpired once she had recovered from the shock. Izuku, meantime, had returned to the sky and was looking for any villain's throat that he could grasp with his fire hands. For him, this had become the standard. Fly around in the hopes of being ambushed by a villain or hero who could help him. The heroes would suffer horrifying injuries, and the villains would be killed. Rarely, whatever was left of his soul would emerge during these moments to save lives. However, the blood of innumerable people was still on his hands. However, he couldn't let his remorse to consume him. He still had a task to finish. It was impossible to describe the extent of the devastation. It was beyond words. Bakugo, Tsukachi, Izumi, Teleki, and All Might were all staring at something straight out of a nightmare. Dead bodies littered the ground, completely devastated. As the rain tried to wash away the blood, the stench of death filled the air as broken, incinerated carcasses lay there. The green embers made it clear that they knew who had done this. But what's really terrible about it? There were police officers and heroes among the heap of disfigured villains. The remaining heroes were trying to subdue a sizable group of villains who were rioting. But then he showed up as they signaled for backup. Before everything turned to static, Tsukachi was plagued by the last gasps and cries of his fellow soldiers over the radio. Izumi and Bakugo joined All Might and Teleki as their unofficial sidekicks because they were eager to experience hero work. Additionally, it was a 2-day late birthday present for Izumi. A gift wrapped in death, devastation, and blood that they could do nothing to stop. Being heroes for the first time left them feeling weak and powerless. Ah. The five were alerted to the only person left alive by the weak breaths. A man with a blaster, jetpack, and ruined armor. Airjet, the Buster hero, was in critical condition. He was lifted from the debris under him by All Might. All Might halted as he thought, "Don't worry, it's going to be Oka." Something warm spilled on his hand. He noticed a lot of blood. Teleki and the children were appalled. Airjet uttered softly, "It happened so fast." Tsukachi begged him to stop talking and conserve his energy, but Airjet insisted, Even when all of us targeted him, we couldn't touch him. His moves were so precise, so devastating. He's a monster. Something changed in him. There's no reasoning with him anymore. He's merciless." He ultimately collapsed. With his fists clenched and his body trembling, Katsuki snarled, "Damn it. He was going to defeat this person with Izumi. He cannot make them fearful." But the fear that snuck up on them remained. In a frantic attempt to deceive herself, Izumi said, "He'll pay. We'll make him pay." It was an unfamiliar sensation that sustained her. She has a deep-seated desire to find the devil. As though looking for a reason to have hope, Inko gazed up at the sky. She discovered only icy blackness. The symbol of peace gritted his teeth and put his hand over his wound. What a callous creature. Who could be so heartless? "I will stop at nothing to find him and put an end to this horror. Nobody else will be harmed. We will prove our existence to this fiend." Tsukachi and his friend held quite different views on the subject. It was he who was burdened with the knowledge of the Green Devil's identity and the motivations behind his current monstrosity. This is the outcome of Toshinori and his family mistreating a formerly kind youngster, and he wanted to shout it in their faces. He was the only one crying that day because of the tension, sadness, and fury he had been holding inside. He changed in some way. Izuku, how did you fare? 2 days prior, the 15th birthday of Izuku, as far as the Psycho Flames user was concerned, things had begun to improve. He learned that All for One might be hidden somewhere. He took the tip as he had nothing to lose. He came to an abandoned warehouse as a result. Not surprisingly, it was packed with 10 Nomu and other evil pawns of his target. He stood breathing heavily and covered in blood as the score reached 50-1. He was enraged by the fact that those puppets had not provided him with any helpful information. Izuku Yagi. Behind him, Izuku froze and spun around. A TV with audio only was located on the wall above a number of damaged, dismembered, and cremated bodies near the rear of the warehouse. They knew his true name, and Izuku remembered the voice from the phone call he had overheard. There's no question of it. The mastermind is him. Izuku crossed the red, sticky material that covered the floor and walked toward the monitor. All for One. Yet another impressive showing, my boy. Yet, all such a waste of effort. Why do you hunt me? Seeking atonement? Revenge for your grandmother? You can tell yourself that. But you are far from the noble hero you once envisioned yourself to be one day. This society that threw you away, you desire its destruction. You're a clever boy. You understand that to build something truly better means tearing down what came before, but not everyone can accept this truth. That is why you were buried. Izuku's hands clenched. It was obvious that this was an attempt to persuade him to join All for One. He couldn't deny that the Demon Lord made some strong arguments, but he wouldn't let himself believe what he said. If only he could live long enough to see this planet transform, it would be his top priority. Before you get the urge to destroy this place in its entirety, ask yourself, what happens after you achieve your goal of destroying us both? What are the odds someone finds your little journal? We may go down in history, but your family is clearly keeping your story hidden from the world, as will the heroes. How many others down the road will commit the same atrocities you've witnessed in your life? Despite everything you've done so far, people like Bakugo and Yagi are still uplifted, and no one knows the suffering you've had to endure. Not even your parents. Quietly, the Green Devil declared, Izuku Yagi is dead. All for One gave a sly smile that was invisible. Let me tell you a story, one about a person society attempted to erase from history as it will you. Long ago, when humanity was in shambles due to the rise of quirks, there was one man with the power of a god. He could take and give quirks. He used his gift to bring peace and unity to Japan, and planned to do the same to the world. However, his brilliant vision was thwarted by self-righteous imbeciles that called themselves heroes. A terrible war against the divine leader and his enemies broke out. It waged for over 100 years, to this day. For so long, it was an era of impenetrable darkness. The faint light of hope, only to be swiftly snuffed out, drove the people further into unease. The conflicts between the opposing forces ruined countless livelihoods. There was no sure safety for anyone. A time defined by suspicion, resentment, intolerance, and, as you've no doubt seen, barbaric conflicts. The longer he listened, the more the devil's heart pounded. He dreaded the response, but demanded to know, where are you going with this? There was only one power in existence that could stand up to the dark god, one cultivated for generations, and I'm positive you know what it is. One for all. And now that power is in the incompetent hands of your dear sister. Are you starting to understand? This world is a far cry from the one you endured just a year ago. No heroes to save you, and this time, the era of darkness will not be overcome. You have massacred a good deal of my forces, yet the heroes still hunt you. For what? Enacting justice, the justice they preach? You have a choice: continue to destroy yourself and others only to end up a forgotten martyr, or make the smart choice. The devil snarled, this isn't your world anymore either. And yet, its course has been so easy to predict. Ask yourself, isn't it odd that I haven't come for you myself? You're an annoyance, yes, but not worth getting up and eviscerating myself. I still have many friends to do it for me, including Kurogiri, who can have you brought to my doorstep in an instant. The truth, my boy, is that you've only diminished a fraction of my power, and I am still in control of this game. How does it feel to know that, through all your efforts, you're ultimately powerless to reach your monumental goal? Perhaps Izuku Yagi is still breathing after all. Or should I say, Deku. Boom. The warehouse's monitor detonated without warning, engulfing the interior in a shockwave of fire. Izuku remained still and watched the explosion. The skeleton of the warehouse was all that was left after it had receded, with the bodies of those he had killed largely burned to ash. The blast hardly touched him, but it dealt a fatal blow to his brain. He kept hearing the explosions ringing in his mind. He knew too much about it. Every terrible memory he had attempted to suppress returned with a vengeance. The demon balled his fists until his claws sank into his palms, causing them to bleed. "I'll have your skull." In other places to himself, All for One was grinning broadly. "It's nearly too simple to play with broken hearts. He will now intensify his futile search for me and try to destroy me. The public will have to see more fruitless confrontations as the heroes try to stop him the more active he is. These false heroes will fall with no chance of rising again, and the sea of sadness will keep rising. I don't think the heroes will put him to death, at least not before they find out who he really is, whether he wakes up or passes out from tiredness. The least of Toshinori's concerns will be the hole in his stomach." From bad to worse. Endeavor advised Mr. and Mrs. Yayorozu, "I strongly advise you to get further away." Mr. Yayorozu felt a great deal of guilt for what had happened to his daughter. The idea that he was to blame for her predicament tormented him. "With all due respect, Endeavor, I have every intention of seeing this. My daughter was kidnapped and is being held for ransom by my former employees, so I'll see this through." He felt his wife's touch on his shoulder. Endeavor nodded and said, "Please bring our Momo back to us." The flame hero then departed to join his comrades, saying, "We will, you have my word." The former Yayorozu employees had called from a little mansion in a clearing in the middle of the woodland they were in. In return for the daughter, they asked a ridiculous sum of money and a stake in the business. They would never see her again if they didn't. If they touch the girl, they will perish. Try to think. Despite the fact that their circumstances were completely different, the man could relate to Mr. Yayorozu's predicament. He made the decision to put an end to their children's misery since they both felt accountable for it. Additionally, it was an effort to suppress his own shame and remorse. Before the kidnappers could hurt the girl anymore, he, Hawks, and Ingenium intended to neutralize them. But the mansion was instantly on fire when Endeavor arrived. Almost immediately, the building was engulfed in flames that roared like an inferno. From a distance, Mr. and Mrs. Yayorozu looked scared. Everyone was more terrified since the flames were green. Boom! There was little chance for surviving as the mansion collapsed in a huge explosion of fire. "My babyyyy," declared Mrs. Yayorozu in distress. Just a second before, Gurg! A man grunted in agony as a green fire blade ruthlessly stabbed him. "That makes 20, the Green Devil thought as he mercilessly slaughtered everyone he encountered. All for One's comments resonated with him and he became more determined than ever to rid Japan of its vermin. He doesn't always plan to kill any heroes that confront him, but he will if it's necessary. Unless genuinely threatened, he avoided a full-scale demonstration and instead maintained his power on a local scale." In a hallway, he heard two men conversing. One of them cried out in exasperation, "Grr! This is just fucking perfect. What is it?" inquired the other. When the other person said, "The Yayorozu girl escaped. Not only that, she's fighting her way out." She appeared shocked. Izuku remained motionless at the mention of a single word. "Are you serious? I thought she was just a spoiled girl?" "Clearly not. On top of that, most of the others aren't responding. Let's go stop her before she ruins everything," they said. How could he have forgotten? Yayorozu, he recalled. The sole Aldera resident who assisted him in overcoming his demons. The one who allowed him to express his agonizing life. He yelled at the good-hearted person who was attempting to assist him. His heart briefly warmed up for the first time in months before freezing over. He had killed men who were kidnappers. He kept thinking of Yayorozu being restrained and taken, and the terror that was coursing through her. He made the decision to do one thing at that very moment. "I will murder them all." Armed with a bow staff and a shield she made with her quirk, Momo had to battle her way through the criminal fortress. Having knocked out a dozen men on her own, she was ready to compete with the men thanks to the instruction she acquired from her instructors. She was greatly outnumbered, but she was able to persevere because of the talent gap. Momo had been hit a couple of times, but nothing severe. Her forehead was soaked with sweat, and she was rapidly running out of energy after going without food for the last 24 hours. She is only grateful that she acted quickly before her kidnappers had any misgivings. A voice shouted from behind her, "You bitch!" Instead, Momo ducked before a metal bat could hit her, then kicked her in the sweeping motion. The man thumped down on his back. "Gotcha!" She was pounced at by someone from her blind side. He crashed on his colleague when Momo rolled out of his way, positioned herself behind him, and kicked him hard in the back. With her legs about to give out and the stifling hand of tiredness poised to take grip, Momo was gasping and clutching her shield and bow staff. Suddenly, the floor she was standing on broke away and there was an explosion above her. She landed uncomfortably on her back after falling to the bottom floor. Using her staff to assist her stand, she attempted to pull herself up, but when she opened her eyes, she collapsed once more. One of the worst things she had ever encountered, according to what she had been told, was a living viridian fire in front of her. She said, "G Green Devil." Izuku's eyes were closely examining her behind the fire. Her thermal energy made it obvious that she was afraid of him, and he could sense she was tired. Her clothing was ripped in some places, but not enough to compromise her honor. She had several scratches, bruises, and scrapes, and her hair was loose and protruding. Nevertheless, she overcame everything and made an effort to get to her feet, but she only managed to get to one knee. In addition to being brave, tenacious, and talented, they are also persistent and kind to people who don't deserve it. Momo parted her lips to say something. She questioned, "Are you part of this?" in reference to the abductors. As the flames around him started to go out, Izuku gazed at her blankly. When he said, "Momo Yaoyorozu," Momo was shocked to learn that he knew her entire name. "Tell me," he said, revealing a blood-splattered black cloak and a dripping left hand. The bodies of the final two who attempted to attack her lay beneath his feet. He remarked icily, "Do I look like the kind of person who would have friends?" Momo was completely shaken and went pale. I'm really out of my league with him. How should I proceed? How can I help?" Izuku had come to be directly by Momo's side as she was feeling overwhelmed by her obviously hopeless circumstances. "Even if I were healthy, he's defeated so many heroes." She slid away as he tried to cut the nape of her neck, and she swiftly made a shuriken in her hand. She hurled the disc with the razor blades, but the Green Devil cocked his head away. For the most part. Just behind his left eye, the tiny weapon sliced through the flaming cowl. Izuku cried out in agony and put his palm over the cut. His fire was cut by sharp items. It's helpful to know that. I will craft a sword and a... Whoosh. A wave of green fire struck Momo at close range, interrupting her thoughts. She stumbled a few steps from the devil due to the ferocity of the strike, and she groaned as she came to a stop. But instead of being burned or cold, she felt a warmth that was as near to comfort as she could find in this circumstance. She was confused, which made her vulnerable to another blow. She passed out quickly when he cut the nape of her neck. With feelings he hadn't experienced in months, he gazed at her unconscious body. Guilt, sympathy, and protectiveness. To her aware face, he hoped he could say, "I'm sorry." He felt a powerful heat signature coming, interrupting his time with her. Endeavor. As well as others. I would prefer not to. He lifted his fist and rapidly spread his fingers. Even though it didn't contact him or the girl in his arms, that one movement alone set off all the fires in the mansion, resulting in a tremendous explosion. Now Hawks was shouting, "Endeavor," as he indicated a green streak in the sky. Ingenium trailed behind him on the ground, and he and the flame hero instantly chased in the sky. "He's heading straight for the Yaoyorozus." "Hawks, use your feathers," Endeavor yelled. They gritted their teeth and pursued the killer, saying, "I can't. He's surrounded his body in flames." "My feathers would be incinerated before they touch him," they said. Mr. and Mrs. Yaoyorozu, on the other hand, were having the worst day of their life since they thought their only kid had been blown to Kingdom Come. They sobbed and fell to their knees at the atrocity. The creature that caused the explosion fell directly in front of the sad couple, so they were unable to grieve for very long. As the demon approached them gradually, Mr. Yaoyorozu hugged his sobbing wife close to him. They were haunted by the crackle of his fire as he stood right above them. They closed their eyes tightly and prepared for what was about to happen. "I believe this belongs to you." When the Yaoyorozus opened their eyes, they saw their daughter after the devil put out a big, hot fire that had broken away. Her parents were the first thing her hazy eyes noticed when she woke up. They picked up their child right away and gave her a big hug. Mother. Father?" Momo questioned, finding it difficult to accept this as fact. Her parents were sobbing with happiness that she was safe while cradling her in their protective embrace. It caused her own tears to well up in her eyes. Mrs. Yaoyorozu ranted, "My poor baby, we were so worried about you, Momo. I am so sorry for what you had to go through. It was my mistakes that caused you to end up in that awful place. I apologize, my child." Mr. Yaoyorozu replied with sincerity. Momo gave them a hug in return. Weakly, she murmured, "It wasn't your fault, father." Izuku seems to have been forgotten as he watched their family gathering, but he was okay with that for once. Seeing parents who take responsibility for their children's pain in addition to showing concern for them. Izuku's eyes were visible in the flames as they weakened somewhat from his body. For far too long, They shone with an empty brightness. He was experiencing a human moment. All good things, unfortunately, come to an end. Within a moment, Izuku was encircled by red feathers from every side. Hawks, he thought sorrowfully. Although he detested it, they were forced to reunite in this manner. Keeping the Yaoyorozu safe, Endeavor, Ingenium, and the wing hero flanked him. Endeavor said, "It ends here, demon." Izuku had just one choice, and it made him feel nauseous. Act! Momo exclaimed abruptly. Except for the Green Devil, everyone's gaze was fixed on her. He had his palm pointing toward her, his back to her. A ring of green fire encircled Momo's neck. When everyone learned what game he was playing, their hearts skipped a beat. Momo and Hawks were the palest. Hawks shouted, "You wouldn't." But it seemed more like a request than a command. The last time was a breakdown filled with despair, but you wouldn't voluntarily ruin a happy family. Please don't do this, Izuku. Hawks was correct, but he was unaware of it. Izuku had a soul inside of him, no matter how hard the world tried to destroy it. They weren't positive that he wouldn't kill Momo in particular. Momo felt Izuku's fingers coil and squeeze her windpipe. In a desperate attempt to catch her breath, the poor girl scratched at the burning ring around her throat, but to no avail. Her vision darkened again, and tears welled up in her eyes. Hawks shouted, "Stop!" with a panicked tone. With his palms up, he called back his feathers to his wings and fell to the ground, saying, Just stop." The fire in his hands was put out by Endeavor, who held them up in a non-threatening manner. Ingenium also raised his hands. The experts gave up. Izuku let Momo inhale as he spread his fingers apart. As her parents held her, the girl started coughing and her eyes started to well up with tears. The fire ring around her throat was still there, but she was still in danger. With his back to everyone, the Green Devil formed wings on his back and left. Hawks was insulted by the impersonation after being flattered by it. Someone cried out to him before he took off. "Why you?" Izuku stopped dead in his tracks, and everyone's focus was once again on Momo. Everyone was amazed that Momo, in her feeble state, had the guts to ask the Green Devil, "What happened to you? You can't have been born like this. You're not completely heartless. So why? Why are you like this?" The devil slowly swiveled his head to peer over his shoulder at her. Everyone stiffened, anticipating his next move. He didn't do anything to them, though. He exposed the cut Momo had given him by letting go of the flames surrounding his left eye. It appeared to be a bloody tear streaming down his cheek. It diverted his attention from the real tears that were welling up in the corner of his eye. However, for a little while, Momo and Hawks observed a very depressed child. At last, Izuku shot skyward at a great pace. After a few minutes, the ring around Momo's neck vanished, and the professionals understood not to chase him. However, he might be kilometers gone in any direction by then. Momo's parents hugged her tighter than ever, but her feelings overpowered their words. Those eyes. Her thoughts turned to those awful, agonized green eyes. She had seen such eyes before. A soft punch to her forehead cut through her thoughts. Hawks, who was crouching and grinning at her, gave it to her. Momo flushed a little at the compliment and bent her head. "You got some real guts, rich kid. I don't know a lot of heroes who would mouth off to the devil like you just did. Thank you, sir." Endeavor noticed the expression on each of their faces. He grunted and folded his arms across his wide chest. Naive children. Izuku had seen this scene far too often. Being covered in blood, surrounded by corpses and fire. This time, a tiny mansion's interior and exterior were covered in more than 100 bodies. The creature rejection clan's flaming, crumbling temple. While searching for a spot to relax, he happened upon them. Once he joined their cause to purge the mutant scum that plagued this country, they began to spout rubbish. Let's just say that Izuku became enraged as he thought of Sue and her siblings. Fortunately, he arrived in the kitchen before it caught fire. He located a leg of turkey, prepared it himself, and then sat and ate while surrounded by corpses. A frantic voice said, "You." But Izuku didn't recoil. He turned to see the skull mask smashed and the only surviving member of this bigoted tribe, her robe smeared with blood. Her body was spread out on a coffee table, almost still. After finishing his breakfast, Izuku walked carefully over to her. His eyes were soulless and icy, and his quirk was not hiding them. "You're not a heteromorph," she murmured in between screams of death. She vomited more blood through her mask as the Green Devil raised his foot and pressed it on her injured stomach, saying, "You're something far uglier." Before stomping so forcefully that his foot went through her stomach and broke the table underneath her, he said, "You're right." When he drew out his foot, Tiny pieces of human innards were adhered to his boot, which was stained an ugly scarlet. He didn't feel anything, though. Izuku felt more sleepy than ever when the effects of the turkey took effect. In a flaming mansion filled with corpses, he let himself sleep. Izuku had no idea how many hours had gone by or how long he had slept. It was hard to tell the hour because of the heavy clouds. However, he woke up in a heap of ashes and burnt bodies, so it must have been a long time. His heart didn't beat for them, though. As he made his way to the woodland, he thought, I should get cleaned up. He draped his black cloak from a tree branch he had discovered. It was more of a cape because the front was ripped off right below the collarbone. To remove the blood, he let it hang in the rain. Izuku discovered a lake close by after walking through the rain. When he looked into its reflection, he saw a strong but damaged soul that was covered in blood and appeared to be as lifeless as a living thing could be. The vision of that torn soul was washed away by the foreign blood that trickled from his hair and fell into the reflection. With the blood covering him difficult to remove, Izuku let himself to tumble into the lake. He knew he couldn't wash it all off, so he didn't bother. Musudafu's deserted streets saw the first snowflakes fall. An unavoidable feature of superhuman society is the destructive conflict, which has claimed countless lives, both good and terrible. The previously bustling streets were now silent and lifeless. With the exception of one who trudged through the cold, using his special quirk to keep warm. The person who might be considered accountable for the upheaval of society. More than most villains, the soul has stolen. The devil in green. Clinging to his chest and gasping for air, he fell to his knees. His fires went out considerably. Weakly, he muttered to himself, all for. Suddenly he sensed something. The flames on his back had been sliced by something sharp. Izuku held up his unoccupied hand. Just a few inches before the missile got stuck between his eyes, he managed to catch it between his fingers. The feather was red. Hawks. He thought, instantly recognizing this. The lack of enough sleep, along with the extreme stress and remorse, must have weakened the Emerald Demon's senses. It wasn't until he witnessed them firsthand that he realized how many body heat signatures there were. In front of him stood whatever was left of Hero Society, all dressed up and staring at him. The winged hero himself was at the head of this group. With his usual casual smile, Hawks said, Hey buddy, remember me? The feather caught between his fingers was burned by the green devil. The demon snarled, Good to see you, too. Go now. Hawks lost his smile. Izuku struggled to stand up, but he said, Yeah, we can't do that. He grumbled and said, Get lost. Hawks did not back down. Izuku interrupted him, saying, Please, don't make this harder than, did you not hear me? Large wings emerged from his back, and green flames spread to cover his face, hands, chest, and feet. With his flames raging and the earth surrounding him on fire, he assumed a combat stance. He said, All of you, get out of my way, in a rough, raspy, and scratchy voice. Anger, hatred, antagonism, and hostility were all evident in the terrible stare that burned in his eyes. Hawks adjusted his glasses, a twinge of grief visible in his gaze. He withdrew two big, thin feather blades from his wings and said, So be it. We'll have to do this the hard way. Hawks and Tsukachi were standing in front of a sizable contingent of pro-heroes, who were Japan's remaining law enforcement. We're gonna get straight to the point. We're taking down the Green Devil. Hawks replied. The room was filled with worried whispers. Endeavor raised his voice. Tell me you have something of a plan. Going after that demon without one would be suicide even with our numbers. Tsukachi grinned. The big screen behind him switched to a satellite view of the Earth before focusing on Japan. First, let's get to what we know. Thanks to Shield Tech's modified satellite, we have a good set of eyes, and we've been tracking the devil for a couple days now, waiting for a chance to strike. It's coming. The scene changed to smoke and green embers, then to a freshly started fire, and lastly to a frail figure wearing a fire jacket stumbling through the chilly, deserted streets by themselves. This is a real-time feed. He's getting weaker, not eating or sleeping half as much as he should. He wouldn't be doing this to himself unless he had a goal, something he's desperate and impatient to see happen. We know what it is. He's after All for One. A chorus of outcries erupted around the room. Although it was being kept secret from the general world, All for One was now well known inside the hero community. With everything already going on, they don't need to know about the man who can steal peculiarities. Some of them questioned, could he want to join All for One? But Tsukachi swiftly put an end to this. We have reason to believe he is actually against All for One. You see, what little number of villains he does let live, we've captured and interrogated. The boy wants to kill All for One himself. The heroes were astonished for yet another reason, particularly All Might. Even though time had worn him down, he was the only one who understood the type of threat All for One posed. Endeavor questioned, if that's the case, why interfere? Not unexpectedly, few individuals voiced opposition to the statement, the devil is on his last legs, let him fly head first to his own destruction. All Might's statement, that's not the worst idea, startled Hawks and Tsukachi while simultaneously instilling fear in them. He may not succeed in killing All for One, but he should certainly do some damage. A battle like that would certainly be easy to notice, and we can finish them both at once. All Might suggested letting his son die to make killing All for One simpler, which startled the investigator and the bird. Unknowingly, he is making the actual fight ahead much more difficult. You're forgetting that would give All for One the opportunity to steal an incredibly strong quirk, one he could combine with others to create something disastrous, Hawks said. Worst case scenario, All for One somehow convinces the Green Devil to side with him. The Demon Lord has a silver tongue, if it happens, we're all dead. We absolutely cannot allow the Green Devil to reach All for One or the reverse, Tsukachi stated. Hawks reminded everyone of the task at hand. Don't think this'll be easy cuz we're going after an exhausted kid. He's unpredictable, but we can say this for certain. The further he's driven into a corner, the harder he'll fight back. He's also known to learn and grow the more he fights, perks of youth. If he manages to escape and recover, I doubt we'll get another chance to stop him. This is the decisive battle. If he stays on the path we've predicted, he'll reach an abandoned district in, give or take an hour, where we can fight without worrying about civilians. Here are the teams to intercept. Team Forefront Hawks, the leader Top Genus the Ingenium. Arms of Death the Kamui Woods the Edgeshot the Backdraft. Their goal is to deplete the Devil's energy even more so that the Heavy Suppression Squad can defeat him. A close-knit team with the most devil fighting experience. Team Heavy Suppression All-Power Effort Teleki. Finally, the rear guard, by some slim chance, the devil manages to sneak past them. The rear guard the Ryukyu Mount Lady at Midnight. Mirko Nijire-chan. It's possible we'll get interference from other villains, so we have a backup squad waiting nearby. The backup squad Gum Fat, Leader, Burnin. Kido Onima the Senator Lemillion Bakugo Katsuki. Yagi Izumi Todoroki Shoto. Everyone was ready to move and knew their jobs. This horror would finally come to an end. All Might stopped Hawks on his way out. He said, "Young Hawks, a word?" The wing hero understood that this was not the moment to say no, yet he still wanted to. "What's up, big guy?" he inquired, grinning carelessly as usual. Hawks dismissed the worry, saying, "I couldn't help but see you deflate a few times during the meeting. You expect me to be happy about it when we're about to engage in a full-scale conflict with a murderous child?" All Might's smile faltered. "That's not what I mean. I know you want to save him, but is that even possible? Mountains of corpses, rivers of blood, countrywide panic. You can't make him see reason or offer him forgiveness. Some people are simply beyond redemption." Hawks gazed out onto the way ahead, no longer meeting All Might's gaze. The wing hero left with a serious demeanor that didn't sit well with the symbol of peace. "So that's your advice, number one? Abandon a kid who's already alone. You know, if all we're expected to do is terminate enemies, we're just soldiers, that's it. I didn't sign up for that. I signed up to help people. I signed up to be a hero." As he walked into the control room, Tsukachi moaned in his hands, "I can't believe it's come to this." Hawks smirked at him and said, "Assembling most of our heroes on Izuku, putting children on the battlefield. Hey, maybe fighting fire with fire is what we need here. It's not like the kids are leaving the nest for the first time. The Yua trio are some of the strongest in the school, and they got their licenses." Tsukachi let out a sigh. "And what about All Might's sidekicks? Izumi and Bakugo have substantial experience in the field, plus they're brash and don't plan. All Might and Teleki raised them to believe that they'll be the best. They can't be trusted to know when to toe the line. I don't know much about Shoto, but the point is, no matter their strength, they shouldn't be out here." Hawks agreed with the detective in silence. He fervently hoped that the Son of Endeavor would be more difficult to set on fire and expose to assault. The Green Devil will kill Bakugo and Yagi without hesitation if he sees them. Then we'll just have to cross our fingers we can do this without the backup squad. Let's move out. Now the Mistress of Fate can be ruthless and erratic. Hawks and Tsukachi knew that very well. The investigator recalled the day Toshinori told his stepchildren about him and his line of work. Izuku took notes on almost everything Tsukachi said, while Izumi paid little attention. The expression in young Izuku's eyes when he expressed his desire that, after he became a hero, he would be able to collaborate with Tsukachi and his father. Now, that joyful recollection served as a harsh reminder of how twisted fate can be. Hawks didn't hesitate to extend his hand to assist him once he and Hawks were certain of his identity. Hawks witnessed firsthand what the Green Devil is at his core. A wounded, lonely child in need of assistance. He vowed to save what remained of the young man's soul the day he and Izuku met. They were on the verge of a full-scale conflict to defeat him, despite his and Tsukachi's best efforts. Endeavor shouted over the communicator, "Give it up, Hawks, we're well past the point of reasoning with this bastard." Hawks prepared for battle even though he ignored the senior hero's advice. The fiery figure in front of him followed suit. In the control room, All Might told his detective companion, "It's time, Tsukachi." Unwillingly, the man pushed a button connected to the Shield Tech satellite. Every shelter in Japan has a screen that showed a clear feed of the upcoming fight. The green flame of terror would be permanently extinguished for the entire nation, and just keep an eye on me, David, and I'll make this a safe country for Melissa to visit. Now is the moment. Izuku stood prepared to fight, his hands, feet, shins, chest, and face all covered in flames, his wings emerging from his back, and his hair turning green. Flames were burning up to his waist around his perimeter. He gazed at the gathered heroes, his eyes burning. The entire nation is eagerly awaiting the outcome of this pivotal conflict. He was staring at the front wing hero, who was staring back at him. Hawks said, "I'm sorry," and he spread his wings to fly. "I never wanted it to come to this." The heat of the devil increased. "Me neither." Team Forefront, the Green Devil encircled himself in a cyclone of fire as the winged hero shot into the skies at breakneck speed. Any external attack would burn up before it could reach him, so Hawks cried, "You're up, Genist." The devil's flames were severely diminished, and he was suddenly restrained by his black cape. With the first line, "Despite being from the black market, the material is of excellent quality," Best Genist gained the full attention of everyone. Extremely durable, flexible, high resistance to any force natural or man-made. How kind of you to wear the perfect pocket for me to zip you into. The heroes then launched an offensive. Even if Izuku was restrained, he was still too heated to fight up close. But Kamui Woods made the attack possible with the help of Backdraft's icy water. The Arbor hero stretched his arms into huge appendages that resembled logs. His goal was to render the enemy unconscious, but he managed to evade capture. Despite avoiding Kamui, he was soaked in icy water. Izuku had to stoop as the bottom of his cape crushed itself to the ground just as he was ready to take to the skies. "Hugh," he was about to say, "Genist is a problem, I'll have to," when a white blur slapped him across the face. The heat energy of a radiator alerted him to it even if he couldn't see it. Ingenium. Before the heat overcame him, he managed to land a hit and reel back. Kamui struck his right shoulder hard at that same moment. TCH. Izuku sent forth a stream of fire powerful enough to nearly burn his cape and, thus, Best Genist's grip on him. Kamui Woods and Ingenium were advancing for their next attack at the time he did. Izuku charged toward them at a speed they didn't think he could achieve before they could retreat. He seized the left arm of the Arbor hero and the right leg of the Turbo hero. When Ingenium's engine blew, hardware and blood flew everywhere. Kamui's arm was cut off and burned. The two men screamed in agony. Best Genist was then targeted by the Green Devil's palm, but Hawks dragged him away from the flames. An opening. Hawks considered who was astute and cunning enough to take advantage of the little window of opportunity. All he could hope was that he wouldn't go for anything important. Izuku gasped, a stinging agony piercing his stomach and radiating out his ass. "Ah!" The young man grasped his stomach and fell on one knee. He coughed blood on the ground and said, "Ed Shobura," as his flames dwindled. In his typical crouched position, the ninja hero landed with a backflip, returning to his normal shape. His body was burned, but he maintained his composure. "Even though I only spent a short time within his body, I was almost burned. His inside temperature is far higher than his external temperature." The boy's tummy seemed to be filled with lava. Edgeshot saw the boy collapse, practically immobilized. With that hole in his gut, he won't be doing much more. The time has come. With their fists ready, Death Arms, the strong hitter for the Forefront team, charged forward. After the humiliation he inflicted on him, he has been eager for his opportunity to destroy the devil. This time, you'll get more than just a bruise. So excited. So irresponsible. The Green Devil burst into flames as soon as he approached. He drew a blade and pulled his arm. Cut. Thump. Luckily for Death Arms, Hawks's feathers moved quickly enough to partially remove him out the way. At the bicep, the professional's right arm was severed entirely off his body. He yelled in pain, "Grayag HHH!" His cries reverberated across the empty city. The horrific image of the man's severed arm shocked everyone, all save one. With haste, the Green Devil stood up and dashed at Death Arm so well, Death Arm. His ability to move and exert more force than before the conflict started was incomprehensible to everyone observing him. When he touched Death Arm's wound, the man let out a yell of excruciating pain. The muscular pro heard the final words before he was destroyed by a huge explosion. "You're still such a bore." Once more, the Green Devil was in the air and rushing away from the scene. "Oh no you don't," Hawks pursued. Although he had no intention of attacking, he was unable to get close enough to do so. "He's injured. This is just a short-term adrenaline rush. Perhaps things will be easier for the heavy suppression team." Hawks was right when the Green Devil started to lose altitude and speed. As the flames that had engulfed him began to fade, he abruptly plunged precipitously into the concrete. An unseen force pulled him down as he attempted to stand up. He felt it just on the unignited parts of himself. Teleki. Team Heavy Suppression. The Green Devil was being held down from a great height by Teleki, also known as Inko Yagi, the telekinetic hero and Izuku's biological mother. Because of the harm he caused to her spine, her capacity to function as a hero somewhat declined because she had trouble moving anything below the waist. Long range is now her greatest option, and it's still effective. When Izuku realized who was above, his anger flared up again, and his flames resurfaced. He stood up and turned to face Endeavor and All Might, who were rushing for him. Toshinori, Enji, and Inko. His churning rage and furious anger returned. The childhood that spit forth the monster the world sees, the treachery, the neglect, and the abandonment. And the man who tormented the most compassionate woman he had ever encountered. Endeavor yelled, "He's injured, he won't even be able to defend himself." All Might said, "One smash, that should be enough to end this." The disaster they were flying toward was unknown to the two of them. Hawks, however, did. "Keep your guards up, he's FWWOOSSHHH." A huge burst of green interrupted Hawks. With a roar of rage, the devil melted the pavement beneath him. His scorching heat rapidly melted every snowdrop that fell. The four professionals were unable to prepare for the following step. Endeavor and All Might were directly targeted by a burst of green, and two flash-fire fists struck them, destroying them with amazing force. "Endeavor!" shouted Hawks. Inko exclaimed, "Toshi!" both of them alerting him to their presence. It went by so quickly. It was a microsecond, an instant. Almost like teleportation, in the blink of an eye. A hand went straight through Inko's stomach as she found herself in the devil's crippling presence. Izuku's hand was still knuckle-deep in her stomach, soaked in her blood, despite Hawks's best efforts to pull her out of the way. Despite his disgust at the gory scene, Hawks was determined to free Teleki. "Shit! We made a grave error." Tsukachi shouted over the comm, "Hawks, what's going on down there?" The devil's power suddenly spiked. Hawks tightened his jaw. "Tsukachi, I think we picked the worst heroes we had to put against this guy." Enji and Toshinori, meantime, had just gotten back up. The flame hero grabbed his chest, breathing heavily. "Sad. Endeavor, the hero, crippled by a child's blow. Get up. Fight." He transformed his power into a javelin by will. He shouted at All Might, "Are you going to do something, or just keep staring into space?" When he saw his wife in pain and covered in blood, the symbol of peace froze. She would have died if Hawks hadn't moved her out of the path for the worse. Endeavor threw his blazing javelin at the emerald monster since he had no time to care about his opponent. The latter turned to sneer at them after catching the attack in his hand. With a whispered curse, Endeavor understood what was about to happen. With lightning speed, the demon charged at them, leaving a conflagration in his wake. Endeavor shouted, "Damn it all," as he also blasted off. To maximize his heat, he folded his arms across his chest. The orange flames become a vivid yellow. He lacks the ability to make wise fighting decisions since he is motivated by rage. "There will just be ash this time," Hawks shouted. "Get out of there, Endeavor," but was not heard. A focused beam of incinerating firepower was discharged by the man, who exclaimed, "Prominence burn." As Endeavor had anticipated, the Green Devil flew straight into the attack. Everyone thought the devil was dealt with for a little moment. The Green Devil yelled, "Todoroki," as he soared straight over Endeavor's strongest blow. With an evil rage behind his eyes and a startlingly low level of damage, Endeavor gazed in wonder and fear. A huge torrent of viridian fire erupted from him as he withdrew his fist. Only to miss because Hawks dragged Enji aside. "We can't relax until he's out cold," he cried. But Endeavor snarled back, "Don't drop your guard just because he's wounded. You children think you can do whatever you want, don't you? Leave it to us adults to put you in your..." With his back to the devil and the feathers he was holding entirely burned, Endeavor paused. In order to confront the youthful monster, Endeavor craned his neck. His eyes were blazed with rage. Endeavor felt a cold run up his spine despite the amazing heat. Unable to move, he watched as his opponent cocked back his nearly white-hot fist. The Green Devil's voice sounded distorted, like that of a real demon. Flashfire fist. Jet Buurrrn. Screaming in agony, Endeavor took the blow squarely to his back. A beam of fire pushed him to the ground, and when he hit it, an explosion occurred. "Endeavor!" shouted Hawks. The second hero was lying on his front in a big crater with emerald flames all around. His only sounds were the bloody coughs he sent out, and he was hardly moving at all. Hawks used additional feathers to lift the injured professional. Detroit. As Hawks attempted to remove Endeavor and Teleki, he thought, "Oh no." Smash. With a fist, All Might sent a strong shockwave straight at the Green Devil. The child discovered that All Might was reducing the distance from his blind area as soon as he dodged. He said angrily, "This ends now, you despicable fiend." Instead, Izuku lunged for it, dodging the evident approaching punch. The gradually expanding fissure in his father's armor, which seemed impregnable. "Erg!" exclaimed All Might. The only other living hero, Hawks, gaped in terror. Izuku had punctured All Might's stomach wound with Endeavor's javelin from earlier. The man's left side gushed blood, but he swiftly took the weapon away. With a quick burst of flames from his fist, the devil smashed All Might to the ground. With a thud, the top hero fell to his knees and cleaned his mouth of blood. "Damn, I won't let you." Uurrrggghhhhh. Toshinori raised his gaze to the approaching sphere of anger and devastation. The sky appeared to be on fire as his cry reverberated throughout the metropolis that had been evacuated. He shouted, "I'll put you in the ground," and drove his fist forward, pulled it back. A massive fist of fire that was several times the size of its wielder appeared. All Might got to his feet and drew back his fist. Texas smash. The two strikes clashed and blew apart as shockwaves and intense heat collided. Hawks were stunned, as were the ones he was carrying. The wing hero observed the formation of a new arena, one that was bigger than the one where All Might and the Green Devil initially faced off. Izuku targeted his weak point right away this time, and he's more stronger than the child All Might nearly defeated. This won't work out. All Might tried to leap across the scorching devastation in the flaming arena, but a flame tendril pulled his leg down. The Green Devil was coming for him. His fist drew back. "Yagi!" he yelled in a fit of rage. To meet, the man in question drew back his own fist. Smash! They struck once more, this time with enough force to be felt by everyone around them. All Might launched his assault without hesitation. The demon he had seen as a youngster was now one of the greatest dangers to innocent lives he had ever witnessed. It was time to stop talking, and he would do everything in his power to bring the beast down. But despite his determination to unleash his entire force and not hold back, the Green Devil resisted and struck him once more. It startled Toshinori. Indeed, after his last wound, he had become weaker, and he gave Izumi one for all. He was only allowed to work 4 hours a day instead of 8 hours as a hero. However, the Green Devil has been undernourished and sleep-deprived for days, and Edgeshot has caused him to get a cut on his stomach. It shouldn't have been possible to advance past the forefront team, theoretically. What's motivating him? After today, Toshinori felt his hero time will be further cut short as he drew his fist back for another blow. BWOM. 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 A crash. BWOM. The sounds of the furious conflict between Izuku and All Might. Each time they struck each other, the earth trembled and the flames spread farther. Hawks could not land too far away since the entire city block was on flames. He still needed to watch the child. The block will turn to ash if this continues. All Might and Izuku were fighting with their fists above the earth inside the fiery arena. The muscular blonde unleashed blows at a dizzying speed, and the demon, astonishingly, did the same, by driving his fist forward with Jetburn's propulsion and instantly sending them back with the recoil of explosive hit. Flashfire fist. Barrage of Jetburn. Izuku's technique for matching his punches is more complex than All Might's, who threw his fists indiscriminately. He must react each time he senses All Might's fists approaching his fire. Therefore the timing must be exact. He learned to trust his senses after surviving alone for almost 2 years and finally becoming a target for both sides. monitoring living organisms' motions and emotional states while continuously reading their thermal energy. His body and quirk respond naturally, even when he is angry. It is nearly tough to sneak up on Izuku. All Might had gone into shock. There was not a single hero he could compare to, but this boy was succeeding. Apparently, they were going at him blow for blow. Izuku was absorbing power capable of destroying buildings, despite his best efforts to strengthen his arms. Meanwhile, his heat was building up to the point that All Might himself was beginning to burn. He keeps pushing his arms into me even though they are cracking with each blow. He must be burning up too, because his heat won't go away. Nobody is immune to their own peculiarity. He shouldn't be allowed to continue like way for very long. Over 300 powerful strikes have been exchanged during the duration of their struggle, and the heat has spread throughout the battlefield. The structures in the area started to collapse. Izuku intensified his attack just as All Might sensed that he was at his breaking point. All Might was forced to defend himself as he was surrounded by a flurry of green explosions as the punches got harder, hotter, and quicker. The fact that the entire Japanese population was seeing its champion barely survive is the worst part. He's having difficulty. Hawks thought, he can't handle much more of this. Tsukachi, tell the backup squad to get prepped. Did you hear me? Tsukachi? When Tsukachi did respond, it wasn't what Hawks had hoped for. Hawks. The backup squad is in no shape to fight right now. The backup squad, a surprising guest, was besieging the backup squad half a mile from where the Green Devil was illuminating the city. As he stood in front of the battered heroes, the villain remarked, "The goal of your squad is to ensure that no villains assist the Green Devil, and to help your friends if he becomes too much to handle. How's that working out for ya?" This guy. Vernon clenched her jaw. He was clearly aware of their strategy based on the way he spoke. They wondered how he found out and how he suddenly showed up. Hovering over his actual victim, the villain turned his back on Vernon, Fat Gum, Lemillion, and Sin-Eater. They were pierced by his icy blue eyes. As he prepared his grenade gauntlets, Katsuki snarled, "Grr. First the devil, now this fucker. At this point, I'm starting to hate firefucks." Melissa had delivered them. Shoto Todoroki remarked, "For once, we agree on something. We won't lose to some random back-alley thug." Izumi declared as she clenched her blowback bracers, which Melissa additionally provided. Above them, the slender man grinned slyly. "Ah, there's no need to be scared, kids. I'm not here to kill anybody. Yet, all I want is to see what the future heroes have to offer. After all, you must be so incredibly powerful and talented to be here without any formal education or experience, right? I want to see what the future of Hero Society has to offer. Assuming there'll still be a society after today." He concluded by shouting as he flew toward them and ignited blue flames in his palms. In the meantime, the sound of All Might hitting the earth and the Green Devil making another break with another ruined area of the city was the sole sound in the control room. Hawks did his best to pursue, but he would have been reduced to a roast chicken if his wings had caught some embers. Everyone in the room was unable to comprehend what had transpired or how the plan had suddenly fallen apart. How the devil began to beat their finest after hardly being able to move at all. Japan had recently experienced its greatest collapse. His emotional state has a direct correlation with psycho flames. Hatred and anger make him stronger and hotter. What, however, could he have known about Endeavor to justify that? Now it doesn't matter. Tsukachi grabbed his microphone. Everyone else in the room was taken aback when their captain said, "Hawks, I'm pulling the rear guard out." The wing hero yelled, "You're what? We can't do that. The forefront team is too far to help you in time. The backup squad is being overwhelmed by a single person." He took down Endeavor in 2 blows, and outmatched All Might in a punching competition. And as he is now, he'll kill anything that moves. He's just too much. The desperation flame was powerful and unrelenting. They tried to beat it down, but it only became stronger. It will now burn and devour everything in its path because it has reached this phase. "No, it's not over yet," Hawks screamed, straining to approach the boy. He was scorched, yet he persisted. "If we don't end this here, we'll all have hell to pay later. Would you rather all for one get his hands on the kid?" Tsukachi gripped the microphone more tightly. "Look at yourself. You're flying into a burning ball of fire trying to reach someone who can't even hear you. If worse comes to worst, I'd rather save as many fighters as I can for the next disaster." Hawks said, "Glad to hear it, me too," before going radio quiet because Izuku's heat was too much for his calm to handle. "I created the rear guard in the manner that I did for a reason. Fighting him now is futile because he defeated the heavy suppression team. So we do what we ought to have done all along." Hawks saw Izuku's speed start to drop and his heat start to wane. Hawks yelled. Izuku. Once again. I get it, you went through something pretty fucked up. You tried going home, but it blew up in your face. You're officially public enemy number 1. You've been through so much pain it's borderline insanity. They call you a monster, and at this point you might even believe it yourself. But I know it's not true. Izuku showed no signs of listening to Hawks, but his steadily declining speed and depleting firepower were encouraging indicators. I saw that look in your eyes when you brought Yaoyorozu back to her family. The shame written all over you when you used her as a bargaining chip to get away, Hawks said. When Hawks looked up, he noticed that they were getting close to the devil's last line of defense. We repeatedly attempted and failed to use force to knock him down. We will now pursue whatever remains of his heart. Nejire wave. Crash. The rear guard and opportune surge of energy pushed Izuku back into the earth. Ryukyu transformed into a dragon and exclaimed, "Good work, Nejire, stay close to me." Right? Hawks followed the pair. He said, "Nice shot." Hawks smiled as he asked the Dragoon hero, "Do you think it's over?" "I really doubt it." Hey, Hawks, do you know your wings are smoking?" Nejire responded, "Yup. He's mine." Mirko hurried to the Green Devil's landing crater so she could kick his ass. However, she screeched to a stop as she noticed a figure slowly rising up and a green light behind the dust veil. Mirko licked her lips and smiled. "You're a stubborn one, aren't you? Well, let's see what." "Burra," she said, but the sound of vomiting cut her off. Izuku hurled the contents of his stomach into the crater, his form bent. Mirko stared in wonder at the heap of vomit that melted into the ground as he coughed out the rest of it. He throws up lava. Hell in hell. Mirko and the others were able to get a good look at the Green Devil as the dust settled. To put it mildly, that was a challenging sight. A youngster, his eyes almost dead, beaten and bloodied. What really caught the attention were his arms. Broken and bruised, nearly unrecognizable, smoldering and oozing blood, hanging limp at his sides. Even he was unable to simply brush off the force of All Might's blows. His arms were completely destroyed. His biceps, forearms, knuckles, and fingers all had bone shards that protruded through his skin. Her crimson eyes met his green ones, and even Mirko was disgusted to see a child with such horrific wounds. Izuku recalled Mirko, whom he had met briefly when he trusted her to take care of Hagakure, Kirishima, and Ashido. He moved away from her and attempted to take off, but he was not quite as fast as he had been. "No you don't," Mirko yelled at him, yanking her leg back. Izuku raised his burning leg to match hers, swerving around to meet her barely in time. He quickly created distance by kicking her away with a wave of flames. She checked her leg when the rabbit hero landed. "Barely even singed me, he's on his last legs. Heads up, Midnight, Mount Lady, he's heading your way." Izuku's broken body held out as he flew unsteadily. A long-haired dominatrix with a whip emerged from a huge pink cloud of gas that he could see when he glanced forward. Izuku was only in pain when Midnight said, "When was the last time you got proper rest? Growing boys need their sleep," in a seductive manner. Midnight. It wasn't another year that Izumi overshadowed him and he was forgotten on his 12th birthday. She was responsible for his first happy birthday in years. He avoided the knockout gas by flying aloft since he couldn't bring himself to assault her. Only to discover that the gigantic woman he was facing was someone he knew. Despite her outward conceit, Mount Lady has a heart as huge as her peculiarity. She and that girl from Uraraka. Uraraka. Are you all right? The mountain hero rushed out to seize him before he had time to think. He briefly considered allowing her to grab him, but his body had already retreated out of her grasp. His actions suddenly felt constrained. Golden rings of energy bound him. "Got him!" exclaimed Nejire. Izuku tightened his jaw. The child once more. He sent out a burst of flames that escaped the energy restrictions with what strength he still had. He turned to face the energy quirk user and saw that she was being protected both literally and symbolically by a motherly wing. Hawks moved in as he froze at what he saw. Hado and Ryukyu have a close relationship, almost like mother and daughter. He hasn't had a familial bond since he was 4, thus he longs for one so badly. He wouldn't deliberately destroy that. I need to remind him of who he is now that he is emotionally open. "Remember those middle school kids you patched up? The boy told me what you said to him, that with hard work, he could be a hero. You've wanted to hear those words your whole life, haven't you?" Hawk's approach baffled the other heroes, while Midnight was the most interested. Izuku did, however, fire another flash of heat when Hawks approached. It was not hot enough to burn the bird, but his wings were burning and dropping off. Hawks grunted but continued. Hawks flitted into the flames to get to the boy, saying, That girl with ox-cord earlobes. She told the police what you did to that scumbag in a hero's costume. Ya know what that tells me. You don't want to burn this world to ashes, you want to see something better. Well, I won't let you throw your life away before you see your wish come true. His consciousness was fading, and all of his feathers had been burned away. He was on the verge of blacking out. A blast of chilly air struck him as the crackling in his ears ceased, and a body with fluffy hair beneath his chin crashed on him, hot and searing. When his eyes opened, he realized that he was falling, but more significantly, Izuku was also falling. Hawks put his arms around the youngster feebly. Gosh, this is going to hurt. Hawks sensed a rising grace rather than the roughness of the ground. Got him, again. Najire chirped, using her surge quirk to hold the two. Hawks grinned. As they were gradually lowered to the ground, the bird laughed and said, "Thanks for the save, hero. I would have had back pains on top of all these burns." Mount Lady inquired, what was all that about? There was no response for her. Once more, no answer to the question, does Hawks know that kid or something? Midnight was simply staring blankly and passively at the boy. Is it possible? Through her earphone, Mirko spoke. Hey, detective, it's over. He's finally burnt out. Room of control. The officers present were applauding the conclusion of this tale. But Sukachi's eyes were watering. Izuku. The word eventually made its way to All Might, a barely conscious Endeavor, and an unconscious Teleki on the battlefield. All Might exclaimed, "This nightmare is finally over." All Might. Sukachi thought, I wish I could agree with you. In other places surrounded by a sea of flames, the blue flame-wielding thought to himself, well damn, that's disappointing, but I doubt he's dead. You three, though, he said, glancing at Izumi, Katsuki, and Shoto's charred and beaten carcasses. Let's see, unrefined lack of control, unearned arrogance and leaving yourself open, and too caught in yourself to use your full power. And they dragged you worthless brats out? No wonder you were on the squad that wasn't meant to fight. The pyromaniac, who was now applying salt to their wounds, was being glared at by the three children. Bakugo attempted to say, why you fucking ow? But got kicked across the face instead. The villain grinned and said, don't interrupt your education, brat. Izumi screamed as he stomped his foot on her injured arm, burning it, saying, cause the way I see it, none of you. He turned to Shoto and said, are the least bit competent. Just spoiled brats who think they own the world. Shoto's expression immediately changed to one of confusion. You're the biggest disappointment of all, after everything that went into what you are, this is how you turned out. The man took hold of his collar and murmured into it, don't worry, you'll have your chance to prove you're not completely worthless, real soon. Behind him, a whirling gateway of purple and black materialized. Until then, I'll be watching. Izuku raising his final feather above Izuku's lifeless body, Hawks poked it into the ground next to him. Sukachi took that as a sign to stop the transmission and give the impression that the Green Devil had died. So, do you two know each other? Cuz you talk like you know him? Najire asked. Not exactly, I just know a lot about him from someone else. Najire and Hawks were the only ones keeping vigil over Izuku's still body for a while. He needed serious medical care for his arms. His face, a small scar from his cheek that grew wider at his jaw, was visible to them. His parents did that. Yaoyorozu's self-defense left him with another scar beneath his left eye. He will likely have a dozen additional scars when the hospital examines him. The other heroes eventually joined the two of them. Ryukyu took Najire by the shoulders and drew her back in a protective manner. After observing the white hair, Mirko remarked, so it was Endeavor's brat, all along. Hawks gave a headshake. He took out his secret weapon, a bottle of hair dye remover, from inside his charred jacket and said, nah, look at this. He spilled its contents, exposing green and black hair as the white washed away. Midnight covered her mouth in a gulp. The youngster who vanished more than a year ago and was thought to be dead appeared in front of them. Yagi Izuku. The son of Teleki and All Might. Everyone was wondering what to do with him at this point. With a feeble voice, he said, Hawks. And everyone jumped. The wing hero paid attention. Hawks disregarded Ryukyu's warning, what are you doing? He'll just exploit your sympathy. Izuku murmured, I deserve to die. Hawks gave Ryukyu a, you were saying, expression. I killed hundreds. Ruined so many futures. I should burn in hell. As though he were dying, his speech came out in harsh gasps. Those around him, particularly Hawks and Midnight, could hardly bear to listen to it. The latter raised his voice. Maybe you're right. Even if the world thinks you're dead, you can't just disappear. All for One wants you, and I'm betting you're still dead set on hunting him. All? Kill him. To atone. Hawks smiled wearily and weakly. Everyone stared at Hawks as if he had gone insane. Atone, huh? Well, you've got one hell of a long road ahead of you. The sooner you get started, the better. Here, he was providing therapy to the individual who caused panic and anxiety in Japan. You idiot! Izuku exclaimed, gasping a little. Hawks laughed. Midnight gently put her hand on his damaged one and said, "Yeah, that's what they call optimists these days. But you know that better than most, huh?" She said, "Izuku, what did they do to you?" The child shed a single tear in response to that straightforward query. "I hate them, Midnight. Every last one of them. I couldn't take it anymore. I broke." The purple-haired woman wiped a tear from her own face and another from him. As an ambulance screamed closer, Izuku uttered his last words before collapsing. "I'll burn this whole country before I ever forgive them."
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, bye bye.